figure the way I'm talking now, as long as I stay around here, it'll be all right.
Perfect. It'll be good.
My wife gets on to me all the time. She's like, "You're yelling." I'm like, "No, I'm just trying to talk to make sure I hear normal." And I'm like, she's like, "Well, you can't hear anything when I'm talking to you." I'm like, "Well, you got to speak up. I'm going deaf here."
Yeah. Getting old. I imagine you fired a gun or two.
Yeah, gun or two. Been through an explosion to where I had fluid running out of both my ears.
Oh, good. That sounds good.
Yeah, it's one of those. When I tried to go back and thought I wanted to be a military contractor, and I was like, well, I'll go make some good money, and this will go on through, and a couple months later, you upside down in the ditch with a fireball over you, and it's like, okay.
Okay, so there was a lot of story before that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we're rolling now. I don't know if you're aware. Are we good? We sound good? We look good? Okay.
Okay.
So let's back up, and then
we'll go as far back as you want to go, from birth till wherever, or whatever you want to do.
That's got to be the thing lately. The guy tells the story. Like my last guest was Edgar Mills. I don't know if you know Edgar or not.
I haven't watched that one yet. I'd been looking at going and doing some training with Edgar, but I was waiting until I could stabilize myself with my left arm, which I'm there now.
Yeah.
With the shoulder replacement, I went and did an aggressive rehab program, which was 3 days a week. So from the second week up until last week, I was going 3 days a week, and finally give myself some time to kind of recover from the rehab, because in itself, it's pretty demanding.
That's intense. Yeah, 3 days a week.
So a lot of soreness and a lot of strength building, a lot of mobility, trying to get flexibility back. But
so what was you had the resurfacing done before you had the replacement. What was the resurfacing like?
It wasn't bad. I had the resurfacing done, and at the same time, they fixed the rotator cuff, bicep tendon, and labrum back in 2015. I was back on the road working. 2013. I was back on the road working in 8 weeks.
Wow.
Now, disclaimer with that, I was working in records, because they're like, oh, we'll let you come work records, and then, you get back on the road. Records is horrible.
I can't imagine that being like a super exciting thing to do.
No, it's not. And I basically went back to Dr. May. He's the one that did that one.
Charlie
and I was like,
May.
Yeah, I love Charlie May.
Yeah.
And I was like, you got to clear me. I got to get out of the office.
Yeah.
And
whatever it takes.
He's like, okay. Well, I walked into the deputy chief's office after getting cleared. I was like, hey, I'll be back on the road. I got cleared. And he goes, I've always said records will cure what ails you. And I'm like, Chief, no disrespect, but I begged my doctor to go back out on the road.
Yeah. Beg, borrow, and steal, whatever it takes. Get back out there. So you were a cop at the time. Was that your like initial career path, or?
So, starting from the beginning with growing up with my parents, both my parents were mill workers, and I don't want to say I'm sharing too much, but I didn't have the easiest upbringing, but I didn't have the worst either. Yeah. My dad was an alcoholic, so we dealt with that, and my poor mother. She had it difficult growing up, as well as being married to my dad, and she always thought the best thing was to keep the family together. So they end up getting divorced later on, after being married for 26 years. So there were some tough times there.
Yeah. How old were you at that point?
I was in my 20s when they got divorced.
Yeah.
They got divorced in 03, 04. I'd started working with the county police department when I was 19 at the end of 01 going into 02. Disclaimer with that, I had no business at that age being in law enforcement at all. I understand they'll still hire into some jails at that age, but, they need the help. But 21 years old is a good
starting point. I mean, at 19, you still feel like you're invincible, right? You can kick the door down and run in there. And
yeah, but it's you get a reality check very, very fast.
Yeah.
You have to mature very quickly with how you talk to people. Nobody in their 40s and 50s wants to hear a 19-year-old tell them, hey, you need to go back in the house.
Yeah.
They need not to come back out tonight.
Yeah.
So I had to deal with that. And I used maturity very loosely because even at 43 years old, a lot of people will tell you I'm still immature, which,
Yeah.
you know, I've always been told, well, you're only as old as you feel. I feel really old, but I try to live young.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But yeah, no doubt that my parents, both of them who are now passed on, really cared for us. My dad just had a problem.
Yeah.
You know, and there would be times he'd get sober and stay sober for a long time, and it was great. Then there'd be times that, you know, he'd come unglued and go on a binge, and, you know, he'd lose his temper and stuff. And,
Yeah.
and my mother would never allow my dad to discipline us because of the way he drank.
Yeah.
And she was a believer in not sparing the rod. And any kind of discipline I ever got, I deserved it. But I'd have to, being honest, looking back at it now, I'd have to say, you know what? Nowadays, I can look at it from an adult standpoint, and yeah, some of it might have went a little too far.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not that I didn't ask for it initially,
Right.
but so.
Well, that's my thing. Even as a dad, you know, in my 40s now, I got to check myself sometime, and I think I get to the point, and I go, I should have disciplined them 30 minutes ago before I got this mad.
Right.
Because now it's not going to be good. You know, I've let them get me to this place. And
Yeah, and it's and you know, I've always been stricter because of that law enforcement background, and you see things and you're like, oh, I don't want my kid to grow up into that, so you're stricter. I don't want my kid to do this, so you're stricter.
right.
And you know, my oldest son, love him to death, but I think he hates me sometimes for as strict as I've been. And you know, he's gotten to where he talks to me in a manner that I'm like, okay, I see your point.
Yeah.
And you know, maybe I shouldn't have got mad about this. Maybe I should have let it digest a little bit more.
Right.
And I don't want to say he's been an advocate, but he's been the way he has matured and the way we work things out or try to work things out has kind of spilt over to his little brother, to where, you know, I do things a lot different with him. And I know that Bo doesn't. He doesn't always feel like that's fair. Well, if that would have been me, you'd have done this. And I'm like, well, you know, Bubba, I'm learning. You were my first kid. I didn't know. I made a lot of mistakes. But,
Right.
But, you know.
He's a good kid, though. I got to spend some time on the mat with him this past week at jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
He comes in and he's yes, sir, and no, sir, and does exactly what Coach asked him to do. And
Coach PJ's known him for a long time because he when he was 5, he did USA Wrestling with him.
Okay.
Wasn't old enough to compete at the time, but
Right.
would let him train over
Yeah.
at the Mooch, you know.
Yeah.
And but yeah, everybody I talk to, from teachers to everybody else, is like, he is one of the most respectful kids we have. And I'm like, well, I'm happy to hear that, because, you know, being dad, he's going to push dad as far as he can sometimes.
Right.
And you know, I understand that.
Well, I mean, the Bible says, you know, train up a child in the way he should go. When he's old, he won't depart from it. So maybe he does hate you sometimes right now, but when he's our age and he's sitting around and he's going, you know, old man was right, you know, and he's looking at his own kids. And
yeah, I had times that I was like that with my parents, and as I get older, I can see why my mom would do things a certain way.
Yeah.
And I've always said, and I've always told him, you know, Bo, I love you enough to let you hate me for a little while.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And you know, I just, that's just me being honest. You know, I love my kids enough to let them hate me for a while if there's something that they don't like, or if, you know, there's some kind of discipline they don't like.
Yeah.
You know, back to my dad being an alcoholic, that's the one thing that I didn't like it, but I knew I didn't like it enough that it's not where I wanted to be as an adult.
Right.
So learning from his mistake, something I was able to avoid. So
Yeah. Well, yeah, there comes a point, and he might have been the first one in his family, but so many times that's a cycle. And it was his dad and his dad and his dad, and that kind of thing gets passed down. And somebody at some point has got to say, I'm going to end this in my
Right.
bloodline.
not that I don't partake every now and again.
Sure.
But and with my dad, it was his mother and father both who had the issues.
Right.
And in my dad's younger day, he drank a little bit, and it really didn't get bad until back in the 70s. He owned a service station in Rockmart. It used to be my grandfather's. And my grandfather and grandmother on that side, I never met them. They passed away before I was born. But his dad left him in the service station, and you can still look it up now. There's an article where a train was backing up and hit a school bus full of kids in Rockmart back in the 70s.
Okay.
And so they called my dad. He took his wreckers down there to help stabilize the school buses while they got injured and dead kids out of it. And my mom and dad's neighbor at the time, who they were really, really good friends with, their kid was on that bus. My dad didn't realize it until after he got him out of the bus.
Oh.
And I think he carried that with him a lot, and not making any excuses for, the way he was. But I think he really carried that with him a lot.
Well, the tow operator or record driver, we used to call them way back, those guys get overlooked as first responders.
Oh, absolutely. That's why, props to Andy Reeves as, within Roman, Floyd County, and I'd say a lot of other counties, Andy and Lloyd's is the best tow service we've got. And I don't overlook Andy at all. I appreciate Andy, especially when I was on the road and we needed something. He was right there, hooked up, ready to go.
Yeah.
And he knows what he's doing. Very, very competent, So if I mention somebody on this podcast, I've got a lot of respect for him.
Sure, yeah.
And Andy's one of those people.
Andy's a great guy.
Andy, Bobby, and all of them, they do really, really good.
Yeah. But those guys are there the same as law enforcement and firefighters and EMTs, and they see all that stuff too.
They get their taste of it because they're seeing it. Mm-hmm. A lot of people will overlook our dispatchers, who they're the ones that take the calls and they hear it.
Yeah.
And there have been times, if it weren't for dispatchers getting me help when I needed it, I'd probably not be sitting here.
Sure, yeah.
Of course, there's some other times too that after running somebody down and keying up the mic and throwing up into it, they wish they wouldn't have heard it. So,
right.
Sorry about that, guys.
Oh man,
gals.
Yeah. Sorry, we chased a little bit of a rabbit there, but
yes. I mean, it's it is what it is.
Yeah. But I don't know, a traumatic event like that, and it probably wasn't one. It probably wasn't just one for him. If he was a tow truck driver, he saw more than that one wreck.
Most likely, and I think that's the one that got him, and then he ended up drinking himself out of that business. Is kind of what happened.
Yeah.
So, and to my understanding, it was a really good business as far as there's also mechanic shop and stuff.
Right.
Of course, back in the 70s, 80s, we didn't learn a lot about mental health until I'd say late 2000s, but
Pretty recently.
2010 and beyond, I would say, maybe a little bit before that.
Yeah.
You got from Vietnam War era and all these other wars and stuff going on that, people would come back with post-traumatic stress, and nobody either wanted to acknowledge it or wanted to do anything about it.
Yeah.
And that's one of my biggest gripes with when Northwest Regional got shut down and everybody, flooded into the community.
Yeah.
I can remember Tim Burkhalter and the Chiefs getting together and writing letters and saying, hey, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it could not have been any more correct, because that's exactly what happened. The community got flooded with people who need mental health. And if they don't have, 24/7 people helping them, they're not going to take their medication.
Right. Well, and I remember, from my time in public school, there were kids that ended up in the public school system that needed that they needed help we couldn't give them,
Right.
from 7:30 to 3 every day.
Right.
And there they were with all the other kids and, doing their best, but they had their own set of issues.
Yeah, it's and I feel like ultimately that was the catalyst for, I don't want to say my dad's downfall, but for his drinking the way it was.
Right. Yeah, that's not an unreasonable approach.
Yeah.
Because who's to say, we all got our set of experiences and we could say this is the thing that caused it or not, or, whatever, but maybe it was a snowball thing, but.
Yeah, and I used to have a newspaper article where they had took a black and white photo and it had one of his records backed up holding the back of the back of the school bus because they were afraid it was going to collapse or roll over or whatever.
Right.
So I'm not sure what happened to that. I guess if I scoured enough, I could probably find it. But we've moved around so much. I've gotten rid of stuff, lost stuff.
Yeah. So you've, I don't know, I'm stepping on your timeline a little bit, but you haven't been here long, right? You grew up here, but you guys were in
we were gone here for a little over 8 years, and we've been back. Me and the boys been back about 2 years, just short of 2 years, by a couple months, and my wife has been back. When did she get back? She's been back about a year.
Yeah.
And that was some good times. But
Yeah.
we'll get back around to that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how you want to go with this timeline here. I've never done.
It's your
done
timeline,
this,
man.
So.
We'll do whatever you feel like.
So I got out of high school, and I was going into the Army as a mechanic. Got in the Army and dislocated my shoulder again. And being 18 years old, I was pretty stupid. And they're like, well, have you had these problems before? I'm like, well, I dislocated it before. And they're like, that's not in any of your paperwork.
Uh-oh.
I'm like, okay. And they're like, so this existed prior to service? I'm like, no, it just happened. They're like, no, you've had a prior injury, which means that it makes it easier for this to happen again. I'm like, okay, so what's going to happen? Am I going to go to a medical hold and get back in training? And they're like, no, we're going to med board you out of here because you were untruthful on your application. And I didn't want to throw the recruiter under the bus because he knew about it. And he's like, don't say that. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to say that.
Oh, no.
So I'm like, golly. So I got med boarded. And then it was not long after that, I'd seen John Kohler used to be the Save-A-Ton on Burlington.
Mm-hmm.
He pulled up in the county car and said, hey, man, what's going on? He's telling me about this, this awesome job that he's got with policing after he got out of the Navy and stuff. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. He's a couple of years older than me. And he said, we're hiring. You ought to put in an application. I was like, yeah, I don't know, think about it. So I did. I went and put in an application, and there must have been 150 people for like 4 jobs at the time. So I was like, well, I don't know how this is going to go. Well, I took their test. I did their interviews, and Bill Whitener called me. He said, hey, we're only hiring 4 right now, but you're number 7 on the list. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, you're number 7 on the list, so if something happens, we may call you. I'm like, all right, good deal. Well, a week later, he called me and said, hey, we had 3 fail the polygraph, so you're like number 4 now.
Oh, no.
I'm like, all right. So I went and did my polygraph and psych test and all that and passed it, and ended up getting a job with them, which was at the end of November 01, and we went to mandate after that. And I was not a good student in high school. That's one reason I'm like, I don't know why they wanted to hire me, because I graduated high school with whatever a D average was.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I got a
Good enough.
Like I got a 10-week school to go to. At the time, it was 10 weeks. It was down in Cave Springs. And they're like, academic portion can be difficult. I'm like, golly.
Tell me about it. Yeah.
And the deal is, at the time, if you fail 2 tests and 2 retakes, you're done. And you lose your job.
Ugh.
So I was like, okay, well, I can do this. The first week we were there, our first 2 tests, one was a GCIC test on, what are the rules and regulations for, running somebody's ID and all kind of stuff and purpose codes. And
Right.
Well, I failed that test. I'm like, oh, okay. And they're like, well, you got to retake tomorrow. So, okay.
Not a lot of time to study.
Not a lot of time. But I got to review, and this was just a 10-question test.
Oh, no.
You got to make it 80 or better.
Yeah.
So I got to review it, and I'm like, all right. Well, I passed it. No big deal. Then at the end of the week, we had another test. Man, I failed that one too. And I'm like, what am I doing wrong here? And my table partner, the person that was with me that was assigned to the seat next to me, he failed the same test. He'd failed both tests. And his name is Bo Greco, and I'm like, Bo, what is going on here? He's
Y'all
like,
weren't cheating off each other.
No.
Failed the test together.
I'm like, man, I don't know. I said, now I'm stressed. Mm-hmm. Well, we passed that test. Now, once you fail one and retake, you can't fail anything else.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, I got 9 weeks not to fail anything.
We're a week in at this point?
A week in. And I'm like, okay. So I went to Greg Moss, who was one of the instructors there. I was like, you got to tell me how to study. He's like, what? Yeah. He's like, how did you get here? I'm like, I filled out an application, but that's not why I'm talking to you.
Right.
I need to know how do I study? Mm-hmm. I was like, I wasn't a good kid in school. I mean, I sucked.
Yeah.
I said, I need to know how to study. I said, I was like, my job's dependent on this.
Yeah.
And he's like, when you go through here, there's certain things on the page that'll jump out at you. I said, yeah, they're called words. I'm like, I see all of them.
They're all there.
But he went through a little, kind of giving me some advice. And anyway, went through mandate, finished, passed everything, and got to graduate with the nice French blue pants that the county used to have.
Yeah.
And everything. And got put into the FTO program, which was another 10 weeks. And at the time, when you get in the car with the FTO, you see that air vent, that belongs to you. Everything else in this car is mine. Don't roll the window down unless you ask me. And I'm like, well, okay.
So just for the listener and anybody who may not know, including myself, FTO is field training officer?
Field training officer, yep. And this was 23 years ago. Yeah. So a lot has changed.
I'm sure.
And my FTO smoked. I don't smoke. Mm. Never smoked. And I was like, man, if you don't mind, I need to roll this window down. I can't breathe.
Yeah.
And I toughed it out for about 2 weeks with him. And finally I was like, look, you got to let me roll the window down. I'm like, you're killing me.
I'm actually dying over here.
I was like, it's like I go home and my girlfriend thinks that I've started smoking because of you.
Yeah.
And, he's over there laughing and Kerry Cooper, he lives down in Florida now. And ultimately during this FTO program, we end up building a really, really good relationship. Mm-hmm. But I said, hey man, you got to let me roll this window down. He said something. I said, and we were out at Midway Park Road over there, in that park down there at the end. Mm-hmm. I said, well, you need to go down here and stop for a minute. I got to get out of the car. And we went and stopped. And I said, I need to see you outside the car. And he come over and I said, we're going to get one thing straight right now. I don't smoke, and I'm going to roll that window down, and either we're going to fight about it now or we're going to fight about it later. And he smiled real big. He said, I could tell you've been hurting for a couple of weeks. He said, I was waiting on you to grow a little bit of a spine. And I'm like, really?
Oh, man.
And so, we just kept on trucking through the FTO program. And he's like, during this program, you're going to get tested, not just from me, but from other people. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
He unzipped his shirt and he's, we got this warrant. We're going to go serve it on this guy. Okay, no big deal. He said, you're going to serve it on him. And this was back when they wanted to know if you were going to put your hands on somebody.
Yeah.
They'd go pull a warrant on somebody that they knew 100% is going to fight with you.
Yeah.
And
trial by fire, right?
yeah, we went down Rockmart Highway and pulled up behind a long driveway behind, used to be an old garage right there, just past Wax Road down on the left.
Mm-hmm.
And we went up that driveway and go in there and ask for this guy. And I did. And he come out of the door, and it was from the porch to the yard to the driveway to everywhere else. And Carrie's over there smoking a cigarette. Said, just let me know if you need some help. I was like, no, I about got it. And so I ended up getting him hooked up, put in the car, and he had a bunch of meth on him and stuff. And
man.
I'm like, I tried talking to him, being nice to him. He didn't let me say anything. He just tried to go. I'm like, all right.
All the talking was done.
That's just the way it was.
Yeah.
During that time.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing is during that time is they're like, when you come into work, you go home when you leave work, and it don't matter how you get there. You make sure you get there.
Yeah.
And I know that's still taught, but I don't think anybody's going out there saying, hey, we know this guy fights and you're going to get him one-on-one.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when I started policing with the county, you might have a north car, a south car, and a supervisor. And you might be down in Cave Spring and need help, and your help is, up in the pocket.
Right. An hour away, basically.
Yeah. And that's just how it was. Learning experience. I wouldn't change how I did anything as far as going to the county and stuff. A lot of good mentors there. George Lemon, Captain Smallwood, all those older generation. Got Tom Ewing, the assistant chief.
Yeah,
that's there now. Mark Wallace. They they give you a hard time, but always teachable moments.
Yeah.
It was a lot of sink or swim. And when they realized that you could swim against the current, you build rapport with them and stuff like that. And they really work with you.
That's one of those jobs, though. They can take you to school, right? Now, this is sit in this classroom and let's teach you how to be a law enforcement officer. But there's no substitute for going out and just doing that job. Yeah,
there's absolutely no substitute for experience.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get the book knowledge, you can learn code sections, and you'll look at that Georgia code book, and it's all written in black and white.
Yeah.
But it's not a black and white area that you operate in. It's always gray.
Yeah.
And I've always said it's a gray area because of officer discretion.
Yeah. Well, that guy comes out of the garage that you served this warrant on, and does he got a gun in his belt? Is he going to hit you with a tire iron? Is he going to, anything at his disposal there in the shop?
Right.
So what's do you just shoot him as soon as he walks out? Well, no, you can't do that.
No, nothing like that.
Yeah.
And it's a lot like jiu-jitsu and chess. It's all circumstantial.
Yeah.
Nothing is ever the same.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a routine anything.
Right.
You might pull somebody over for speeding and be in a gunfight with them. Not that that's happened to me,
But you might. I mean, people are crazy, man.
People are absolutely nuts. I mean, they were crazy then, and a lot of it you didn't see because there was no social media.
Right. Yeah.
Back when people had scanners.
Yeah.
Hey, something's going on. Counties,
Dog's barking right now.
That's all right.
Oh, the worst thing I ever did was buy a scanner. I missed so much. So I thought, man, I'll listen to the scanner and it'll be cool. I stayed up all night trying to figure out, who was
man. I'd been on the road about 4 months by myself.
Mm-hmm.
And they had me up in Area 2, which is the Shannon area, this area here where we're at now. And my mom and dad had a scanner.
Mm-hmm.
And they bought the scanner just so they could listen to what was going on.
Oh, that's a Come on, Mom and Dad.
And, I grew up in the village. We lived on Radio Springs Road for a long time, but then ended up in the village near my aunt and uncle who've both passed away last year. But before the Shannon Park had all the big fence soccer area they got now and stuff like that, and it was all still gravel.
Yeah.
I noticed this old car backed up under a tree over there. I'm like, well, that's strange. It's midnight. And then I could see a little cherry glow in the front window. I was like, oh, let me go check this out. Well, I pulled up behind there and got everything going, checked out with it. And the dude sat down real quick. I'm like, what's this dude sitting down for? He's already in the car. And I could see he's hiding something. I'm like, hey, man, you ain't supposed to be here after dark. And I said, what'd you just stick under your leg? I said, that's not something that people normally do when I walk up to talk to them. And, man, he started sweating and shaking at the same time. I'm like, okay. It's like, come on out here. And opened the door and went to turn him around, and he slid his hand up to the top of the car, and he had something cupped in his hand, and I grabbed his wrist. And as soon as I did that, the fight was on.
It was on.
Yeah, he was he had just got done loading a crack pipe.
Oh, no.
And loading it for the second time, and the fight was on, and he tried to drop it and stomp on it to get rid of the evidence.
Yeah.
Man, we were fighting across that park, and Kerry Cooper was on the connector at Calhoun Road when I called out the fight in progress. And the story goes from my household later that my dad went in the living room and because my mom, she always stayed up late. He said, hey, come listen to this. Rick's into something. And she got mad at him. She's like, I didn't want to hear my son fighting with somebody over the radio. You could have told me when it was over with, when I knew he was okay.
Yeah.
And by this time, my mother had gone from working at Gailey and Lord to working at the sheriff's office. Mm-hmm. So she had a good understanding about the people I dealt with.
Right.
And it was fun. It turned into being comical after Kerry got up there and helped me, and we got him all cuffed up and everything. And come to find out, I was like, I went to school with this kid who's just like a year or two older than me, but I couldn't recognize who it was.
Right.
And everybody, Greg Dobbins and them get up there, and Donald Holbrook rolls up, and I'm tired. I'm like, man, I don't feel like I was fighting with this dude too long. And that's before I started any MMA, before any boxing.
Yeah. And
that's part of the reason I got started, is because I was like, man, that wore me out. Like, I was so tired, my teeth were hurting.
Yeah.
And
doesn't take long to get tired in a fight.
No. And that dude only weighed about 140 pounds. Yeah. A little wiry dude. And Kerry's like, yeah, y'all should have seen when I pulled up. And I'm like, wait a minute, I got to listen to this. He said, yeah, I pulled up, and he had that boy's shirt holding it like the reins of a horse, and he was sitting on his back. He said, I wasn't sure if he was trying to arrest him or ride him. And I'm like, oh, my God. I said, well, that shirt's part of the problem. So I grabbed that shirt, and it was so dingy, it just started ripping off of him, and I was trying to hold on to it, and it was just ripping off of him. Yeah, that's one of those things they've just given me a hard time.
But that's two fights we're talking. We're 35 and a half minutes in, and you've been in two fights already as an officer. So how often, I don't know, it's been several years now, I guess, since you were on the road, but how often does that kind of thing happen, even in small town Georgia?
It depends.
Yeah.
And what it depends on is, I always worked. Even with the county, when I worked with the county, I was prone to working Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday for my 410s.
Yeah.
Well, if you work Friday and Saturday night and early Sunday morning, you're dealing with a lot of the party crowd.
Right.
Not so much with the county because there wasn't such of a bar crowd, but, several with the county, which I had one that out on Wet Oak Drive. I responded out there with George Lemon. He's like, every time we go out here, we got to deal with this individual. I'm not going mention who it was, but George will know who it is if he watches this podcast. He's like, as soon as he comes out the door, we're going to have to do something with him. I was like, all right. And, man, that dude slung that door open, and it was one of them storm doors. Normally it's got the chain, but the chain was unhooked.
Yeah.
And kind of scared me when he come out of there. I was like, okay. So I reached out and hit him.
Yeah.
And when I did, he fell off there was only like 2 steps there. He fell off up into the carport, and I went in and hooked him up, and George was like, well, okay, I guess that does sort of the conduct work on that one. Go ahead and take him on up to the gym. I'm like, all right.
Thanks, George.
Yeah. I mean, he did. That dude come out of there, and I was like, I honestly believe if I wouldn't have hit him, he'd have been fighting both of us.
Yeah.
Which, that was not my only interaction with that person, and I'll get to that one. I had interaction with him.
Imagine you have your regulars, right?
Yeah, well, after going to work with the city, I dealt with him quite a bit because he moved into his mom's house. But, yeah, I worked with the county until into 2004 and went to the city in 2005. You know, I feel like the county is where I really learned to hold my own.
Yeah.
Because your backup's kind of far away. A couple good car chases with the county. Things that you couldn't chase people for now, like,
right.
Good Lord, we chased one night for 45 minutes to begin with because he ran. He didn't have no tag lights. And that was all it was. Yeah. I mean, but it was after midnight, you know, middle of the week. Nobody was out.
Right.
Come to find out, he just committed a burglary.
Oh, okay.
So we're chasing this.
He knew that.
Yeah, we're chasing this, you know, 1980 something Suburban that tops out at 70 miles an hour.
Right.
You know, we go down 27 South. We start hitting these back roads, and we're just cutting a big circle. Mm-hmm. And that's when Chief Ewing was still on the road. He was my supervisor, and the initial person it was Donald Holbrook that started to stop him.
Yeah.
And he took off, and I just happened to be right there with Donald. And here we are. We're going in this circle, and this deer runs out and hits Donald's door in between the front driver's door and the passenger and the rear door.
Yeah.
And he said, 74, what was that? I said, you just had a deer run into your car. And we went back and played. That's when we still had VHS. Went back and played it. And you can see the deer hit the car and its antlers pop off.
Oh.
And when they finally had everything set up to where that Suburban ended up having to stop, Donald's trying to get out of his car and has to shoulder block his car to get out where it dent the door in.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I ain't never seen that like that. And at the time, I was driving like I want to say it was a 98 Crown Victoria with 270-something thousand miles on it.
Right.
You know, that was back then where, you know, we're going to get every dime out of this car we can get.
Yeah.
You know, they trade them in a lot regular than that now because you get a car like that and they're just.
Well, if your car blows up in the middle of a chase,
you might as well just wait.
Yeah.
There ain't nothing you can do.
Those are cool cars, though, to look at. The old Crown Vic, they were smooth, man.
I feel like Ford messed up getting rid of the Crown Vic.
Yeah.
You know, I know they went to the all-wheel drive Interceptor and stuff like that. And the Interceptor can really hold the curve, but those Crown Vics were durable.
Yeah.
I mean, they would take a beating.
Yeah.
I mean, they could take some abuse. And not that you're intentionally abusing the car, but
that line of work, though. You're hard on the car.
You're not just always, you know, riding around.
Right.
When you have to respond to a call, you're driving the car hard.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want to overdrive it to where you're reckless, but you're going to have, you know, you're going to put extra wear on the brakes, on the tires, on the transmission, everything. And the Crown Vic would just hold up. I mean, there were a couple years in there that, you know, they may have a modification from the factory or something that just wouldn't hold up, but it was quickly corrected.
This is not a paid sponsorship or anything like that. We're not sponsored by Ford.
No, not sponsored by Ford. Not sponsored by anybody.
Yeah.
But just saying, from my experience at Crown Vic, that's my personal go-to patrol car.
Yeah.
You know, and the Chargers, you know, they're fast and everything, but when we first got those at the city, Man, that'd be 1,200 miles and the lifters would go out on them.
I remember officers that I knew, not even from around here, but the Charger was just the go-to police car at one point, and they complained, this thing's falling apart. And
Yeah, and durability was not a strong suit. Now, if you needed to catch somebody, you're gonna be able to do that because it's got plenty of go to it. Even the 6-cylinders that the city got would, they're quite a bit faster than a Crown Vic. They don't weigh as much. They got a little bit more, horsepower, a little more modern technology and stuff. But now the all-wheel drive version of the Charger, it's pretty nice when you get to drive one at that high-speed track down at Gypstick.
I bet.
Georgia Public Safety Training Center.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is where you are now? Or
No. So I have recently started teaching classes with the police academy at Georgia Northwestern in Calhoun.
Okay.
And have where they're finishing all my background and stuff now. But I've been offered a job part time with GNTC.
Okay.
And like I told them when I went through the process, was ultimately I would like to be the training coordinator for the police academy. So with my background and my training and stuff, that I've got a good shot at it. I don't want to say it 100% is going to happen.
Right.
But it looks pretty good.
But if they see this, we'll shame them into it. They'll have to hire you.
Right? Yeah. I went up there 2 weeks ago and taught a 2-day pit course and
I saw some of your video. That was cool.
Yeah. We actually do that at the airport in Rome.
Oh, okay. That's got to be so much fun.
Yep. And also, along with that, because that's an academy class, pit is now being taught in the academy. Now, I have my own view of that. Mm-hmm. And my view is this. I think it's wrong. You should not be teaching pit in the academy. Maybe after 4 or 5 years when you've maybe been in a chase or two and you felt that adrenaline dump and you're able to actually be in a chase and talk on the radio like we're talking now.
Right.
Which is not an easy thing to do.
I imagine not.
The very first chase I got into was on Alabama Highway, and it lasted all of about 29 seconds because Wayne Smallwood said, "Hey, if you can't talk on the radio, you won't be chasing nobody. You need to disregard that chase. Just discontinue that chase."
That's fair.
And absolutely fair. And that's what I did.
Yeah.
I went ahead and hooked a left on North Avery Road and turned around with the opposite direction.
So catch him next time.
But after a while, it got to where you can, take a couple deep breaths.
Yeah.
And it, you kind of get used to the adrenaline dump. But that's after a combination of a bunch of things. High-risk calls, you're going to have an adrenaline dump.
Right.
After a while, you kind of get used to it, which is it's kind of weird to say, and a lot of people won't understand that. I used to get asked a lot, do you ever get scared when you're on a call? And I had to think about it, and I'm like, I've been nervous on calls, but I've never really gotten scared on them until after the fact.
Yeah.
And really went back
what could have
and thought about it.
Yeah.
For instance, when I was still in the FTO program, with Coop and them, Cooper was my primary, but, we might answer a high-risk call and then whoever's available get there. Well, Kennard Road, there used to be as soon as you turn on Kennard Road and go up, there's a single-wide trailer to the left, and we got a call, hey, this fiance, boyfriend, husband, whatever, he's in this back room threatening to kill himself, and he's got a SKS back there with him.
Oh.
Okay. Well, me and Cooper talking on the way, he said, well, how are we going to deal with this? I'm like, well, we can talk to him. Hopefully it works out. I said, that's all I know to do is talk to him. He said, all right. Well, we got up on the porch deck that was built up to this trailer, and, we went in there, and he said, I want you right here. And then it's like, all right. So I posted up there with my, I got my gun drawn, aimed toward the door because there's a little short hallway. You don't want to be in a hallway at all.
Right.
And Captain Dobbins was a sergeant at the time. He pulled up, and it was me and Cooper and Dobbins in there. And I glanced back, And I realized that my realization was that they were a lot further back than I was from where he posted me. And I'm like, it's like, all right. So they're sitting there talking and they're talking. And then you hear the rifle rack. So I went from having my finger on the slide to on the trigger, and I'm like, I could feel myself getting nervous.
Yeah.
I was already like really hyper focused. But now when I heard that, the hair on my neck stood up. I'm like, okay. If bullet holes start appearing in that door, I'm going to empty this mag and then pull another one, and I'm going to keep going until it stops.
Yeah.
Then the door cracks open real slow, and that dude had his rifle, and he just tossed it over on the bed, and he walked out, and turned into a good resolution.
Yeah.
And Coop, he said, well, what'd you think about that call? He said, let's critique this call. And I'm like, well, I glanced back one time and noticed that you and Sergeant Dobbins were like really far back from where you posted me. He goes, oh yeah, well, we got to save all the experience. That's why we put you up front. And I'm like,
if you get killed, they hadn't lost anything, right?
Yeah. I hadn't lost the 12 and 16 years experience at the time. It's just a new guy in FTO. And I'm like, okay. And I thought about that one for the rest of the day. I'm like, if that dude would have come out, I said, it would have been, and it was, he had a SKS that was ready to go.
Those trailer walls wouldn't have saved you at all if he just opened fire.
No, not at all. And, I wasn't policing at the time, but it reminded me of when Mike Martin got shot on Orberg Road when they had a SWAT call out, and that dude shot through the door with I think it was an AK, and hit him in the knee, or right above the knee.
Yeah.
And I had remembered that, and I was thinking about that too, and I was like, yeah, this somebody would have got hurt. Hopefully we'd have made it out of there, but
yeah.
And I do remember that from where I was at, I probably could have made it out the side door and, across the porch if I needed to. But that was one of those things where you get back and you think about it, that you go from nervous to being like, yeah, that was a little scary.
Yeah.
And if anybody says they're never thought about it and got scared afterwards, they're lying.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I've only met one person in my lifetime who has taken the life of somebody else in a very intense situation that was able to go home and sleep and not have a care in the world about it. I'm not going to mention any names.
Yeah.
But I have no doubt that when he said, no, it didn't bother me at all, I have no doubt it didn't bother him.
Just that one guy, huh?
Just one person.
Yeah.
And that's just, I think he's got like, I don't know what his understanding of life and death, whatever it is, but he's just like, I'm good. It's like he's like, I've never taken the life of somebody that I disliked or hated or done it with malice. I'm good. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's how you have to look at it. Otherwise, I mean, I guess you could say nobody puts on their belt in the morning and goes, I hope I get to shoot somebody today. I hope not anyway.
No. I mean, there may be one or two.
There's some psychos out there, I'm sure. But.
Yeah, and I have no doubt, there's people that during wartime will go into the military because they're like, I can get away with punching somebody's ticket.
Yeah.
There has to be.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I mean, there has to be. You look at how many people go missing in the U.S. during the year and how many psychopaths are out there. There's got to be somebody.
Some of them are signed up, yeah.
And that's just the way it is.
Right.
And people's probably going to be like, is he serious? Yeah, I'm dead serious.
Oh, yeah, 100%. 100%. But I think about that in terms of a law enforcement officer, and you got to pull the trigger one day, and how do you deal with that? Because that's final, and it's just you. Sometimes it's you and this guy, and you shot him, and you're waiting on EMS or whoever to show up, and it's still you and him there.
Yeah.
And in that moment, that's
and from day one that I got signed on into law enforcement, I've always been taught and told every round that is in your magazine that's going to come out of your firearm, if you have to discharge it, has your name on it. It belongs to you, and whatever it hits is your responsibility.
Yeah. Edgar talks about that in the last episode he was on. He was talking about the guy in the mall in Minnesota that made that super long pistol shot.
Yeah.
Well, he shoots the guy 8 times, but he fired 10 rounds. So where those other 2 rounds go?
Hopefully in the wall behind him.
Hopefully, right.
And, I hope the situation never arises to where I have to do that.
Yeah.
Solely because I would not want to be responsible for an innocent person getting struck.
Right.
Even when I was policing, I was like, if I have to do this, and I knew there's going to be a chance.
Right.
Like, if I have to do this, I've got to train to the point where I know I'm not going to miss.
Yeah.
And even, I left the city September 1st, 2017. And even then, I've spent my own time and money and everything else to continue training. And as far as round counts go, I mean, they're up there.
Yeah.
And it's not just like, I don't just go out and just shoot a target. I try to do combat drills and stuff like that just to keep myself
shooting a paper target's
fresh.
Great probably for hunting squirrels or whatever. But
yeah, and, you can do combat drills with a paper target. They're not going to shoot back at you.
Right.
You want to get shot back at, go play paintball and see if your tactics work.
Yeah, right, yeah.
It's going to, you will realize if it's working or not. So you get hit, it stings.
Yeah.
We went to a birthday party here a while back, and my youngest son and a bunch of the other kids. It was a paintball birthday party, and these are 11 and 12-year-olds. And I watch them for a little bit, and then I'd go and coach them a little bit. I was like, listen, when y'all start doing this, start working this L-shaped formation. And so you lay down cover fire, you come over here behind them, and then y'all win.
Yeah.
They started doing that, and then when they switched sides of the field, I went to the other kids. I'm like, hey, y'all start doing this. So now they're trying to pull this L formation on each other, and it's kind of 50-50. It depends on which one is firing the most that's winning.
Right, so, fire superiority.
And not that I got a little tactical knowledge. I'm not like the grand poobah or nothing.
Right,
but, some things work, some don't.
Yeah, yeah.
But I definitely enjoyed my time with the county. Totaled one of their cars.
Which, it happens, right? I mean,
yeah. Yeah, I was up in Shannon, and Metro officer at the time said, hey, I'm behind this vehicle. This guy's got 7 felony warrants on him. We need him. I got turned around on Minshew Mountain Road, and he took off, and it's raining, and I'm like, okay. So we come across and end up going over 53 in heavy traffic, and with the rain and everything, and I'm like, and one of my supervisors, I'm not going to say the name. They are retired now, but I'm not going to say the name. Says, when you get a chance, put them in the cheap seats. And that was code for wreck them out.
Yeah.
It's like, all right. And when we got to Pierce Hill and Pinson Road, that's what I did. And that individual was driving a quad cab Dodge truck. And I took that Crown Victoria and went through the front end of it and knocked the front end out from underneath it. And I said, dispatch 1050, which means wreck.
Right.
And I said, all right, we'll get everybody on the way. We're going to need state patrol. And then the other supervisor said, all right, I'll be on the way up there. And so I met that supervisor when, of course, he's retired now too. But I met him behind the chaos, and I was like, I'm going to need another car. And he's like, I was afraid that was going to happen. State Patrol pulls up, and I'm like, here's my license. He's like, what happened? I said, hell, he was running, and that's what happened.
Yeah.
He's like, but he was
see
running.
it right there.
Yeah, he said, but he was running from you. Yes, sir. I said, well, it looks like his fault then. It's like, okay. And so, you know, hey, that's the way he wrote it up. So if that guy's running from you and his vehicle gets totaled, that's his fault.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Oh man.
And,
It doesn't make sense to run, whether or not you think you're being justly stopped or whatever. Well, they're gonna catch you.
Eventually.
You got radios, and even if you drive into the next county, they're gonna know you're coming. You know.
Well, it was funny. We went to court on that, and I can't remember how long after that we went to court. And the Metro officer, who eventually was my supervisor at the city, because you know Metro's a joint.
Right.
I'm sitting there and I'm listening to his testimony. He's like, yeah, I called for an available unit because I was behind him to come and get him. He said, and that's how the chase started. And it was the defense attorney that was talking to him. He said, well, how did the chase end? He said, well, they got there at that three-way stop and the county officer rammed him. And I'm like,
no.
Yeah, I'm sinking myself in the seat, you know, lower in the seat. I'm just like, oh, man.
You're going to prison.
Well, at the time, no. I'm not sure how that would. I wouldn't recommend that nowadays.
No.
And that's before I, had any idea on how to pit or teach it or anything.
Right.
It was just, I was told to put them in the cheap seats.
Seen it on NASCAR a few times, right?
Yeah, which later that I was told by that supervisor that had said that over the radio that he said, I meant the cheap seats, not the scrap yard. I'm like, okay, well, duly noted.
Next time.
Yeah, so it worked out. And I do have to mention when I was at the county is when I had my first internal investigation, which ride-alongs. I used to not mind a ride-along, but I had a ride-along I was very familiar with riding with me at the county. And we got a call on Wayside Road, hey, person A shot person B, on Hermitage Road. Person A shot person B, and then my ride-along says, hey, I know who that is. And it was his stepdad.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, what?
What, his stepdad was doing the shooting, or he was the one that got shot? Okay.
No, he was the shooter. And I said, hey, I need to know if he's still at that house because Sergeant Dobbins is like a mile away from there. And he called him, and he said, hey, what are you doing? Nothing. He said, you at home? Yeah, I'm at home. And I said, okay. I said, you need to.
Yeah.
So he just hung up the phone. And I can't remember Greg's number then. I said, hey, my ride-along, that's his relative. He just called him on the phone. He is there at the house. He said he is still at the house. He said, well, I'm turning on the driveway now. I said, use 10-0, which means use caution. I said, because he's still at the house. So long story short is they caught that joker a week or two later. And he told him that I called him and told him he needed to run, that they was on the way to arrest him.
Oh, no.
And I'm going to tell you what, that was I think I had just turned 20 or 21, but to get called into the office and get read Garrity, which means, if you tell me the truth now, it'll be better for you. Long story short, is what it means.
Right.
I'm like, wait a minute, what is all this? What's going on? I said, did you tell this individual that they need to run? I said, no. I said, absolutely not. I said, my ride-along, I said, it was his stepdad.
Yeah.
And he told me, he said, hey, that's my stepdad's address. And I told him, I said, I need to know if he's there because Sergeant Dobbins is like right down the road. I said, he called him and he said, hey, you at home? And he said, yeah, I'm still there. I'm here. What's going on? And then I told him, I said, done that, and he hung up the
Yeah.
phone, and that was it. And then I relayed to Captain Dobbins or Sergeant Dobbins over the radio, said, "Hey, he's still there. Use caution. Why are you going up there?"
Yeah.
But I was cleared of any wrongdoing on that. Which
So what did you write along, text him in the meantime and say, "Hey, you got to run"?
no, this was like 2004,
Yeah.
and like it all happened in the span of like 2 minutes or less.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I had to get called on the carpet, and that's when I got, afterwards, because Lieutenant Whitener at the time was our internal investigator, and all that. Afterwards, I got a speech from Captain Dobbins in his office, and it made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And he said, when you get into this career, he said, you lose friends and you lose family just because of the career you chose.
Yeah.
And not that he was getting on to me, but it was more like you got to be cautious of who you associate with. It's not that I was associating with anybody that I shouldn't be.
Right.
And he's right. When you get into law enforcement, you have family members that'll distance themselves from you, friends, so-called friends. That and then you got the people like, "Hey, can you get me out of a ticket?" And every now and again, I'd make a call for somebody, and my poor wife probably got 12 or 13 tickets from the city of Rome for not wearing her seatbelt.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the first few times, and it was always Mike Simmons, God rest his soul, love Mike. First couple times I said, "Hey man, can you cut her a break?" And then he called me after one of them. And I said, "Man," so she ain't gonna wear her seatbelt. Don't worry about it. I said, "I'm invoking a new rule now. Nobody needs to call and ask me to cut them a break on a ticket, family member, nothing." And I think since that day, I called one time when my mother got a speeding ticket and said, "Hey, can you cut my mom a break?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was it. And I've had people call me and was like, "Hey, do you know so and so?" "Yes, I do. Do your job."
Yeah. Everybody knows a cop.
Yeah.
And I can say, "Hey, I know so and so. Why don't you cut me a break this time?"
Yeah.
I'm like,
And,
no, just do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. I'll get to one a little later about one. I think I might. I don't know. I'm thinking about that one for a little
Well,
bit.
I got one for you then in the meantime. So my daughter's 17 now. She just turned 17 back in January.
Right.
This has been 6-8 months ago now. She had driven up to an event in Somerville, was on the way back. She calls me. "Hey, this police officer wants to talk to you on the phone." I was like, "Oh, okay." So it's, I think I don't know if Somerville's got city police or if it's Chattooga County or who it was. But he was like, "Hey, this officer so-and-so." And I just stopped this little white car going as fast as it could go through Somerville. And when I asked her why she was doing it, she said, "I just wanted to see how fast my car could go." I was like, "Holy smoke, she's going to jail." He said, "If you'll promise that this will never happen again, like I'll let it slide." But she was going fast enough she could lose her, super speeder or whatever.
Right.
Downtown Somerville. And I was like, "Man, I would appreciate." She didn't get to drive for some time after that, but I was like, "Man, I would appreciate it if you just let her go because I really don't have to pay that ticket."
Right.
But,
I understand that too.
Yeah. But it was cool of him because he could have just yanked her license, And she
So I don't know if my wife's going to listen to this or not, but sorry. I'm going to go ahead
he
and
already got you out of some seatbelt tickets.
Sorry. So my wife worked at the sheriff's office for a couple years before she decided to, do the radiology military thing. I was working one morning and I heard this call go out about State Patrol trying to catch up to one that was moving pretty quick. So I pulled over in front of the jail and I waited. Oh, they got him stopped at the top of the hill on 53. I'm like, well, he's good. So
Yeah.
I'm going to turn around and go back into town. Didn't think nothing of it. for about a week, my wife was acting weird. I'm like, what's going on with you? Oh, man. And I felt so bad for her. She said, I got pulled over on the way to work, and that trooper yelled at me. And
no.
What if I took you to jail and you was wearing that uniform? You just worked right over there. And I was like, well, what do you mean took you to jail? How fast? He wrote me for 98 and a 55. That's before the speed limit was 65.
Yeah. Oh.
And then I'm like, are you kidding me?
45 over.
And then, and I'm like,
43, yeah.
I'm like, you're going to lose your license.
Yeah.
And she's like, am I going to lose my license? I'm like, you're going to lose your license
100%.
and you're going to get a super speeder ticket.
Yeah.
I said, and I pulled over at the top of the jail. I saw his blue lights. I didn't know it was you. And so
was it good or bad that you didn't go on up there?
Probably good. Probably good. She's like, I'm gonna be late to work. Yeah. Sorry, babe.
Yeah.
But so I talked to an attorney friend of mine. I'm like, look, I just don't want her to lose her license. She'll pay whatever fine she's got to pay.
Yeah.
He said, bring me the ticket and then I'll call you.
Yeah.
I said, and I told him, I said, she needs to pay this one.
Right.
So she needs to learn how to leave on time. And he called me back and he said, you in town? He said, yeah, stop by my office. He said, I got this squared away, but I said, okay. And he said, I got it squared away. She'll just pay a fine and they'll reduce the speed. He said, but she's still going to pay the super speeder fine, but she's not going to get any points or lose her license. Mm-hmm. And I went to his office, and he was smiling. I was like, what's up? He said, man, I walked in there. He said, look at the copy of the ticket they gave me. It's got a smiley face on it.
Oh, my God.
And I'm like, it's a smiley face next to the speed that was on the ticket to where he locked her in at 98 miles an hour.
Oh.
And he said, yeah, I was this close about having the whole thing dismissed. He said, but he said, Judge Burkhalter looked at that and he said, oh, no, she's got to pay something going that fast. And $345 ticket.
Ooh.
And that was, that's been some years ago.
Yeah.
So that,
It'd be a $700 ticket now.
Oh, yeah. Not counting inflation and stuff. That was a hard ticket then. But,
yeah, that's tough.
But yeah, it was. I remember that specifically. I'm like, $345. He's like, yeah. He's like, normally it's an $85 ticket. He said, but that super speeder got her. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay.
Oh man.
I guess what happens when you got a little SVT Ford Focus that'll do 140 miles an hour.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Which we still have that car, by the way. I mean, it's a ragged piece of crap now.
I mean, you're invested now. You had to pay an extra $345 on it.
Yeah, we might get that money back if we send it to the scrapyard.
Yeah, maybe. You've got it back in gas mileage, though, over the years, probably.
Yeah, maybe.
Some other car.
It was a 6-speed, so I do remember when I drove it out to her to Texas to drop it off when she was in tech school. I think I got about 30 miles a gallon then. So
Hey, not bad. Not bad.
No, not bad. But that's one of those. I was at the city when that happened, but that's one of those interesting things.
Yeah. Yeah. It might have helped that you were, I guess maybe it helped that she was in uniform too, but.
Oh, yeah. He would have took her to jail if she wouldn't have been on the way to the jail to work.
Right. That's tough. Slow down.
But, he did, it cost us money. She was wrong. He did the right thing. He did what he was supposed to do.
At that speed, yeah. I mean, she was going 15 over. You go, hey, slow down.
Probably wouldn't even have stopped her at 50.
Maybe not.
Later in my career, from about 2012 till I left in 2017, I'm like, if you're not going 17 over, I'm not even pulling you over.
Yeah.
So, and it's different from every. Some people are dead set at that 15 mile an hour mark.
Yeah.
But I got to the point, I'm like, unless you're 17 or better, it's not, nah.
Well, that's what we had, Jeriah Tucker on. He's never written a speeding ticket. Never done it. But he's been Officer of the Year like 4 times.
Right.
Because he makes all these felony arrests. He's like, who are we looking for?
Yeah.
And if you park on the side of the road and folks see you, they'll probably slow down anyway,
Yeah.
He's It's like, I ain't paying on all the judges' retirement. Let's get
Right.
criminals off the road,
Yeah, I understand his view. It's
Yeah.
you know, I'm not a fundraiser for the county, or I'm not a fundraiser for the city.
Right.
Now, you know, I went to work for the city in 2005, and that was a long FTO program. That was 17 weeks then.
17 weeks.
And I started with Brandon Eakey, God rest his soul.
Yeah. Brandon's a good dude.
Then Glenn Atkins was my second FTO, God rest his soul. Or maybe I got that backwards. It might have went Atkins, Eakey, and then Arrington. Arrington was my last one. So anyway, the FTO program was very interesting because that was at a time where I was training a lot and working on doing MMA and stuff, which not that I had like a great MMA run or anything, just a few fights here and there. A lot of judo tournaments, stuff
Yeah.
like that. But
I think I was at least one of your fights.
if it was at Shorter College, it was
Shorter.
probably
Yeah.
yeah.
I went to 2 different events there, and I was pretty sure you were on the card with one.
I was on both of them up there.
You were on both of those?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Who else was there? John Chapman was on
John
one.
Chapman, yeah, me and him trained a lot together for the second one, which was going to be
David
his
Kirby there too?
first one. I'm not sure.
I don't know. I know I saw him fight in the forum. I don't know if he was in the ones that
I'm not
Shorter
sure.
or not.
Not sure. But yeah, during that FTO thing, it went like I went from day shift to night shift, and that's kind of where I started getting my reputation as being a go-getter or an aggressive officer. Like, I like to go out and work.
Yeah.
At that time, you know, I'd shake the bushes to see what fell out of them.
Yeah.
You know, I can remember running a guy from Mickey Bradford. I'll say his name. I don't know if he's still alive or not, but I ran him from profile all the way to the overpass on the railroad tracks like on Liddale. Run him on foot, and my radio went dead.
Wow.
So I had to call dispatch on I had the old POS Nokia phone, and I called them, and my radio wouldn't transmit, but I could hear what was coming through it. And I kept hearing Glenn Atkins say, 88, you okay? 88, you okay? Because I told him, I said, well, I'm going to walk down this trail. It's where, you know, it's a domestic violence thing. He said, that's where he's supposed to went railroad tracks.
Yeah.
Well, I seen him and he took off, so I went after him.
Yeah.
And it was in August. And I ended up getting on my phone calling dispatch. I said, hey, I can hear y'all, but my radio will not transmit. I'm in a foot chase with this guy. We're going back toward the overpass, toward Old Lindale.
So you've progressed as an officer where you couldn't drive and talk on the radio, but now you can run and talk on the phone and the radio at the same time. Good job.
Yeah, radio not working. Cell phone worked fine.
Yeah, there you go.
But I ended up catching up with him and got him handcuffed and everything. And finally I was like, hey, this is where I'm coming out at. And we had to go through this briar thicket to get around there. And I remember John Sisson and Randy Kirkpatrick and them coming up there, and I couldn't even talk. I was so tired I couldn't even talk. I'm like, here, take him. And man, I come out of my uniform top, took my vest off, and they're like, you all right? And I'm like, I just need something to drink.
Yeah, just got to cool off.
I don't remember how far I ran him, but
Oh,
man, if I tried to run now, I'd fall over.
Yeah, I couldn't. There's no foot chase. What is that?
No, it'd be more like a foot watch.
Yeah, well, there he goes.
Yeah, yep.
Get him next time.
But that was one of those things that when I got to my final stage of FTO, we caught some kids breaking into the office, some of the offices on 2nd Avenue, right across from Central Plaza.
Yeah.
And we took off running after 3 of them, and we kind of split up. And you're still training and everything.
Yeah.
You know, it was before I had kids. That's when I would work all night, sleep, and then go train. I was training an extra, 20 hours a week.
Right.
So I was in shape. And ended up running one all the way around to behind Central Plaza, and I was ended up walking in back, and my supervisor at the time got mad at me. He doesn't work there anymore, but he got mad at me. He said, why aren't you with your FTO? I'm like, I had to go catch this guy. He said, but you're supposed to be your FTO. I'm like, sir, I can't help that my FTO can't keep up with me. I'm like, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but
right.
But now we got one of the people that's breaking in the building.
Yeah.
He ended up saying the other two, they live over here.
Right.
End up being a bunch of juveniles, but either way. And Joker put in my paperwork that I couldn't follow instructions and stay with my FTO.
Oh man.
So I had my captain do a rebuttal on that one.
There you go.
But I was like, really?
I actually went and caught the guy. He's back there sucking wind.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't bad.
Yeah. I mean, that's an eventful job. I imagine there's, like you said, nothing's ever routine.
No.
Nothing
And
is the
there
same
was
way
a lot
twice.
more. There was a lot more to do when I worked at the city because everything wasn't spread apart.
Yeah.
Especially when you work the bar crowds. And that could be, you might have a couple good weekends and you might have a couple weekends where everything is like imploded.
Yeah. Wild stuff though, man.
Oh, yeah.
Not like, I guess not a much downtime period. I mean, you probably always find something.
During the wintertime, when it gets really, really cold at night, that's
Yeah.
when things slow down a lot. You might start looking at traffic a little bit more. I mean, if it's 2 o'clock in the morning and it's 12 degrees outside and somebody's weaving, they're drunk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most likely.
Safe bet.
Most of the time.
Yeah. It's worth at least looking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll go a little different direction. You did have a little bit of an MMA career.
I don't know if I would call it a career. It was more like a hobby.
A stint.
I want to say I was it was from like 05 to 08.
Yeah.
At one time, I was ranked 10th in the state of Georgia in 205-pound weight class.
Okay.
I held on to that for a little bit, and that's about as good as it got.
Yeah. How many fights are we talking about?
Just a few. It didn't take many. It just depends on you. If you beat the right person.
Well, it wasn't as much of a thing at the time. There weren't just MMA fighters and gyms on every street corner.
And that ranking was through the International Sport Combat Federation. So realistically, it was probably more like 2,000 in the state of Georgia.
Right.
I did have an opportunity that I turned down because I knew I wasn't ready for it. What season was it? I would have to go back and see which season Blake Bowman was on The Ultimate Fighter. I did have an opportunity.
Can you call that for us?
I can't remember if it was like 1 or 2 or
it would
3.
Have been.
It was early.
Would have been early, yeah.
It was
like
early.
maybe the season with Forrest Griffin and
but
all those guys.
I did have an opportunity that I could have tried out for it, but I turned it down on my own accord because I was like, that's
a lot.
That's not gonna. Like, I feel like I'm pretty decent.
Yeah.
But I'm not anywhere near what those guys are.
Yeah.
And even, I was always a striker, but, learning jiu-jitsu and stuff and judo has helped. But even then, like, my jiu-jitsu game is not, like, anywhere near what some of these other folks are. Like, so you got some of these folks out there that when they're doing jiu-jitsu, they're like 10 moves ahead. I'm lucky if I'm like 1.5.
I'm trying to, just figure out what's next.
I feel like as far as jiu-jitsu goes, my greatest accomplishment in that was being awarded my blue belt by Carlson Gracie Jr.
That's a big deal.
So, that's my greatest accomplishment as far as jiu-jitsu goes.
Yeah.
Didn't finish, going through the testing process for judo, brown belt in judo.
That's solid, man.
Man, I'll be honest with you, I'm probably so rusty now, I probably couldn't throw a toddler.
Well, the last thing I always hate when I go into jiu-jitsu class and they're like, we're going to warm up tonight with judo throws. And I think, man, it's a good night to quit jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
It was in 07.
07. So that would have been,
that'd have been about right.
what, first season, second season?
I don't want to say it may have been the same season with Forrest Griffin.
That was the first season.
Or it might have been the one after.
Yeah.
That was the Matt Hughes, Robbie Lawler,
That's right.
It's the second season then. Okay.
Yeah. So, and I remember Blake got put out early too, and I'm like, man, I'd have been put out earlier than him.
Yeah.
And you know, I say, you know, who Blake is and everything. I don't like know him personally. Personally, I know him in passing from seeing him at different places.
Right.
And I even had people like, oh, you need to really go and do that. And I'm like, you know, Chris Arrington, he's like, dude, if you got that opportunity, take it. I'm like, no, man. Like
It's a different level, man.
I'm like, I'm not 6 or okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm not ignorant to the fact that I'm at a certain level, and that's probably about where I'm going to be at.
Yeah. Well, those guys, to get to that level, like they don't have jobs. You know, they're not working for the most part. They're not working day jobs, or they're able to take off enough time they can put in an 8-week training camp and really get after it.
Yeah.
Different levels.
It takes it. I mean, even for what little bit I did, you know, working night shift and then another 20 hours of training during the week on top of that, doing judo, jiu-jitsu, an immense amount of cardio. Dude, man, I'm going to tell you what, I got so good with like doing sprinting stuff that, you know, John Walters put an eye bolt through a truck tire, and I think this thing was like a 275, 85, 18 or something. And we'd get done with training. I'd think, he's like, no, you need to go do sprints with that tire. And I would, you know, like
just dragging
20 down and back sprints.
Yeah.
And, you know, his place was on O'Neill Street. So right across from it, I mean, it would be the entire from one end of the grass to the road and back.
Yeah.
And,
oh, man.
You know, it was a lot of work and a lot of eating and a lot of trying to recover. And it's not feasible, you know, and unless, see, how do I put this without like painting everybody with a broad paintbrush? Unless you start juicing regularly and taking hormones and performance enhancers, it is almost impossible to keep up with that pace of doing things. Yeah. And if that was your job and that's all you had to do was, you know, fight in the UFC and
just train all the time.
Bellator and all that.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that 99% of them dudes ain't taking something to recover.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they have to.
Well, you cycle out of the testing pool. No, you're not out of the testing pool, but you're off the radar after a fight. Not like immediately, because you test immediately after, but maybe 2 weeks later, and you're thinking about what's next for me, and you're trying to balance.
And I know they're doing good with their testing and stuff now, and you can tell like some of the older people like Vitor Belfort. You can tell when he's on or when he's off.
Yeah.
Because when he's off, he gets real soft and slow. But when he's on, that joker
he's not insane. Yeah.
Right. And you know, you look at him when he was 19 years old. Do I think he was then? Probably not. But as he got older,
he was when he kicked Mike Bisping's eye out.
Oh yeah.
He 100% was on the gear.
Yeah.
But anyway.
And you know, that's one of those. That's one of those things. Like you can tell when you are at one of those competitions. Like, yep.
When you grab hold of that guy.
I mean, I've been to judo and jiu-jitsu tournaments to where I was at a judo tournament and I went to throw this dude and I grabbed him behind his knee and then his gi pants ripped all the way up to his waist.
Huh.
So they stopped the match, and it would have been a good throw, but they stopped the match because everything ripped up.
Yeah.
But when I grabbed hold of that dude, man, it was like grabbing a cold piece of iron. I'm like, this dude is friggin' rock solid.
Yeah.
And then I talked to him afterwards, and he's like, oh, yeah, I'm just getting into this. I've been a D1 wrestler for a long time. I'm like, who you wrestling for? And I can't remember who he was wrestling for.
Doesn't matter. The guy's a D1 wrestler.
Yeah, I want to say it was. It wasn't like one of the bigger schools. It was one of the smaller schools, but still.
Right. Yeah, that's a big deal.
It may have been like Appalachian State or something like that. Which is, I've got a love hate with Appalachian State. That is where the beginning of all my shoulder problems started. I went up there for a wrestling camp back in the day.
Okay.
And I went to do an over and under like movement. And so when they clean the mats up there, and I don't know if it's still standard practice, but whatever's in their water makes their mats tacky. So I went to, I was always taught when I'm going to do the over and under to slide the side of your foot.
Right.
And then plant and then turn. Versus if I would have stepped, I'd have been all right. But anyway, my foot caught and I come down on my elbow, and that's when I dislocated my shoulder the first time.
Yeah.
But
that makes me.
not only did I dislocate my shoulder, but I broke the ball off the humerus.
Oh.
So
That's a whole different ball game.
yeah. So went to the hospital up there, and doctor, I still remember the doctor. I mean, and he was a white-haired dude at the time, which, if I were to check, I wouldn't. He'd probably not even living now.
May
He's
not
pretty
be,
old
yeah.
then. But he said, son, here's what we're going to do. And I was like nervous. I'm like, I didn't want to get cut open.
Right.
Because they were like, we may have to put a plate on that and then reset it or whatever. He said, I'm going to try to set the bone and then manipulate it in a way to put it back in the joint without having to put a plate and screws in there.
Ooh. I'm getting like lightheaded just thinking about that.
So I'm like, okay. I was like, and I told him, I was like, as long as I don't feel it, I don't care.
Right. Yeah. And you're hurting so bad at that point. You just
Yeah.
want to
And
stop.
at the time, I was only 14 at the time.
Right.
And I'm like, as long as I'm not hurting it. He's like, oh, you're not going to feel a thing.
All right.
And it took him 4 tries. And he finally got it in there. He said, whatever you do, don't move. And I was,
Okay.
and they had me, I was wrapped up tight and everything. And he said, whatever you do, don't move. And I went, oh yeah, like this. He's like, don't do that. He started yelling at me, and it was because I was doped up from all the morphine.
Right. Yeah.
But I was like this? He's like, don't do that.
What did I just say? One job. Yeah. One job.
And Coach Tucker, David Tucker, come and pick me up, and he's like, we got to take you to the pharmacy to get this filled. He said, do you want your parents to come get you? And this is like the second day of this week-long time. I'm like, no, I don't want them to come get me.
Hang out with my friends.
And yeah, it was very interesting. He could probably tell you the story better than me about the pharmacy. Yeah, but anyway, I'll leave that to him.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
I see him around every now and then. I'll ask him next time I see him.
it's very yeah. He was my brother's football coach out at Coosa back in the day. And was my wrestling coach at Model. But him and Coach Trotter. But yeah, that I enjoyed the camp up until that point.
Yeah.
And
Man, like I said, I've had 7 dislocations in the same shoulder, and I've never broken the ball off. That's a different animal.
it was just it was just the way my elbow come down, and I didn't even feel it when it happened.
Yeah.
I remember rolling over, and there was a female looking at me, and I'm like, what happened?
Why is this girl on the
And they're
mat?
like, are you okay? It was one of the trainers, and she's like, are you okay? I'm like, what's going on? And they're like, we think you broke your arm. And I'm like, really?
Are you having traumatic flashbacks over there? So I coached this guy in wrestling when he was in 9th grade. And
Okay.
There's a guy behind him, and he's got this spiral, and he goes to take him over, plants, and his elbow just comes apart, and this part of his arm goes up
Right.
into the same kind of thing. He's just laying out there, and he's like, is this heaven? We're like, no, bro, it's Somerville.
Yeah, it took about 30 seconds of talking to her before it went from what happened to, okay, I feel it. Yeah, so,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Once the adrenaline wore off.
Yeah, and then, I went to work for the city. I said 05. That was in June 05. And I probably need to backtrack a little bit. So when I was going to work for the city, I had to go through another polygraph and background and all that stuff. And me and my wife were living in our merchant in an apartment. And this was right after probably 6 months or so after my mom and dad had got divorced, and that's when my dad really went downhill. And I offered him, to stay with us, stuff. I said, but you can't be drinking when you're staying up here.
Yeah.
I don't want you to, But and I caught him drinking, and he lied to me. I said, well, all right, well, you knew what the rules was.
Yeah.
And then doing all the background, everything for the city. Can't remember what me and my wife were doing, but I was away from my phone like all day long. And I think it was just like just needing time away from it,
Right.
And I picked up my phone. I had 25, 35 missed calls, both from my mom and my dad. And I was like, God, or not my dad, but my brother. So I called my brother first. I said, hey, what's going on? I said, I'm sorry I ain't got to the phone. I said, I just now seen all the calls from you and mom. And he said, you need to call the city police department. I said, why? He said, they found Dad dead. He said, they've been trying to get a hold of you too. I'm like, all right. And Stacy and Kim and Zach Stone pulled up at our apartment right after I got off the phone with him. Because they told Debbie Burnett, who was doing all my background stuff, like, hey, we know where to go find him. We'll go get him. Yeah. And, it was all kind of sinking in and stuff. And, I called my mom back and she's like, I was like, I already talked to Scotty, so he told me that they found Dad. And, I talked to Stacy and them, who had lived next to us in the village for a long time, really good friends of ours. Mm-hmm. And so I called Debbie, and I'm like, she's like, hey, we want to pause your process now and all this other stuff. I was like, look, I need to continue on. Right. I said, I can't just stop what I'm doing because of this. And I said, everybody's like being real, kind of like they're hiding something from me. I was like, what exactly is going on? Yeah. And she said, well, I'm going to let you talk to Stephanie Hill, the detective that's working it. I'm like, so there's a detective investigating something. And she said, yeah, just here's her number, give her a call. And I called her and I said, hey, Detective Hill, nobody's giving me any answers. Mm-hmm. I know they found my dad dead over at the store on 411. So what's going on? I said, please don't sugarcoat anything with me. I'm a grown man. Yeah. I used another word, but said, so whatever it is, rip the Band-Aid off. Tell me what's going on. She said, well, gentleman backed up next to your dad's truck to go to work and looked over there and thought he was in there asleep. He was laid over, curled up in a ball like he was asleep. And he said, but then he got looking and realized that he was not alive. Mm-hmm. So called us, and we went out, and it looks like that he took his own life. I said, okay, well, what did he do? And he said, well, he took a razor blade and he cut from his bicep to his wrist, bled to death. I said, all right. And then I got thinking about it. I said, when was this? And she gave me the time and said it was earlier in the day. And I'm like, didn't even realize that me and my wife had come up 411, and that store is right there, and seen all these ambulances and stuff. I was like, I wonder what's going on over there. Hmm. We turned left and went home. Yeah. And they were over there loading my dad in the ambulance. So that's what happened with that. And, Debbie, who is retired now, really, really good officer, really good person. She's like, we want to pause all this. I called her back. I was like, we're going to bury my dad on this day, and we're supposed to do my polygraph the next day. I said, let's just run with it. And she's like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, I'll grieve in my own time. I said, but right now, let's just go through the process. I know it's going to take time.
Yeah.
Went through, passed that, and, went to work with them in the FTO program. Got done with that, squared that up. And that's why I was coming back around to my first bad motorcycle wreck. I hit a deer on my motorcycle on Morrison Campground. And I had a really bad compression bruise from my shoulder to my sternum. Mm-hmm. So that also messed up a lot of stuff in there. And I know I'm skipping around a little bit, but that's just kind of the timeline of things.
Yeah.
And my poor wife, she was at my brother's. I was going to take this motorcycle around the block to get a little bit more gas out of it, and this was in October.
Yeah. And
I was going to put it in the shed for the wintertime. And, well, I didn't make it. And this dude pulled up on a motorcycle, and he said, hey. Then he goes, hey, ain't you Scotty's brother? I'm like, yeah. He said, I'm going to go get him. I said, no, call 911. And
I'm in trouble here.
Yeah, and then Bethany Allison pulled up, and she's like, Ricky? I'm like, yep. And then
everybody comes by,
yeah,
right?
and then there was a nurse that pulled up, and she's like, I'm gonna put this cooler under your legs. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, all right. And I said, can somebody knock the ants off of me? And that nurse was like, you don't have any ants on you. I said, well, I feel it on my neck and everything. She goes, no, that's blood coming from your arm. It's squirting up.
Yeah.
So every time my heart beat, it was just a little tss.
Yeah.
And my wife was down at my brother's less than a mile away. And they come down there, and my brother's like, Rick. And I'm like, I'm all right. And my poor wife was standing there with her hands on her hips, and it was like staring at me with that motherly death stare. And I'm like, here we go again.
I'm laying in a ditch bleeding out. Now's not the time,
Yeah, I gotta, don't ride a motorcycle with a t-shirt, shorts, and tennis shoes.
All the gear, all the time, they say.
That's right.
Get your boots on now.
Yeah. But, I'm a victim of my own stupidity.
We are more often than not, right?
Yeah. And that's my fault because my brother I passed him. He was on an ATV and I was messing with him. So I flipped him a bird and then got in the gas. And then I leaned over into a curb and I seen this brown blur come down the hill. And I realized that there's a deer running out in front of me. Mm-hmm. And this, it's in October.
Yeah, when they're all running out in front of you.
And I slam on the back brakes on this thing, and I'm like, okay, there's a barbed wire fence. There's a white horse. If I hit that fence straight on, my legs are toast.
Yeah.
So I got the back end out from under me, but I still got some scars behind my knees and one from my left knee up to my hip from the fence. Mm. But didn't need any stitches there. Just all the stitches were in my arm near my elbow.
Oh man.
But again, that's one of those things. My mother-in-law, she's dead set on the difference between men and boys or the price of their toys. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of like the faster it goes, the happier I am, or I used to be.
It's fun, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's fun. It's cool. I ride. I've never had anything like that happen, but it's fun until that point,
Yeah. At the time, I was a newer rider. Mm-hmm. Always ridden dirt bikes and stuff, but now I got a bike that'll do 170 miles an hour.
Ooh, that's scary.
Since the statute of limitations has ran out, I will say that I've hit 171 miles an hour.
Do you time and date? Where are we? No, I'm just
No, I'm not going to do the time and date, but I will say it was from 1st Street in Shannon to 53 in the Loop, and 171 miles per hour is
doesn't take long, right?
Doesn't take long. Very, very stupid.
Yeah.
I pushed the my chin so low that my chin was touching the gas filler cap. And I was like, and I didn't sit back up until I'd slowed down to like 70.
Right.
Then it was a slow sit up.
Yeah, you get up and turning yourself into a sail. We've got a buddy that bought a really fast motorcycle a little while back, and it was cool, right? I bought this motorcycle, and it's got all these, this horsepower, and it would go 200 some odd miles an hour. So he found out what it meant to ride a motorcycle 200 miles an hour. This is fun. I'm having so much fun. If I hit a pebble in the road, I'm dead. And then you start easing out of that throttle a little bit.
Yeah. Never been that fast on one again. Probably never will. I know I never will.
No. Too old for that now, Rick. We can't do it.
No. Now, I'm not going to say that I'll never have a four-wheel vehicle that I might not put in the wind. But.
Different story.
But I will take all responsibility and consequences if something happens.
Right.
Disclaimer.
Yeah. Different level of responsibility once we get into our 40s and, growing up a little bit.
Well, see, going back to, when I worked at the county, I worked for Wayne Smallwood for 3 years with him going, I know you from somewhere before you started this job.
Nope, no, you don't. Nope.
So finally, after about the 3-year mark, I was like, yeah, you do. You're right. You want me to tell you, Captain? And he just kind of sang back and said, yeah, go on and tell me, Rick. What is it? I said, well, do you remember getting after an ATV up in Shannon and pulling a kid out of a shower? He squinted his eyes and looked at me. He goes, that was you. I said, yes, sir. That was me. I was 17 years old, and he said, did I take you to jail? I said, no, sir. He said, probably should have. Yeah, he was, at the time, I told him, he said, did you know I was back there? I said, oh, no, sir, I didn't know you was back. I knew he was back there, but I also knew he wasn't going to catch me either.
Right.
But then I got home, and my dad was sitting in the garage, and I was like, if I throw this ATV in the garage and slam the door shut, he's going to know something's up. Mm-hmm. I said, I'll just run in and go take a shower and get all the mud and everything off of it.
Right.
I wasn't in the shower but 2 minutes. I heard knocking on the door. Boom, boom, boom. I said, boy, you need to get out of here. County police want to talk to you. I'm like, all right, I'll be right out there. And, yeah, he gave me a good tongue lashing. But,
he didn't take you to jail.
No, he didn't take me to jail. Of course, the other one didn't take me to jail either. Of course, he didn't catch me at all.
Right.
And Todd Jackson, I apologize. But when
we're past the statute of limitations.
When I was 15, I had a little CR80 dirt bike. Mm-hmm. And I was over there tearing up the Shannon Park, acting like a teenage knucklehead. And I turned around and heard, woo, woo.
Oh, no.
And he was coming this way, and I slowed down like I was going to stop. And I took off, and that's the only way I knew it was Todd later on, because, Todd's big as a house. He used to be a lot bigger.
Yeah.
And,
good old Tiny.
Yeah, good old Tiny. And he turned around and got after me, and I cut that middle section where you got First Street and all that. It's got that little diamond in the middle. I cut that and went up toward the water treatment plant up there, and where they cut through the power lines.
Yeah.
I cut up through that thing, went up there and took off, and by the time I finally got back around to the gravel road that goes to the pump house, we lived in that corner house on 4th Street at the time. We were renting that before my mom and them had bought the house on 2nd Street later on.
Yeah.
And I was coming down that little curve, and I cut that bike off and threw it under a tarp and went in the house. A few minutes later, I see that Crown Vic come by real slow with the windows down, looking around. I'm like, so I guess I'm in the house the rest of the day.
In a couple days, probably.
Oh yeah, I left that bike laying under that blue tarp. I'm like, man, I hope he don't see that thing.
Oh man, the trials and tribulations of the Shannon Village, man.
Yeah,
Wild stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
That Shannon Village, it was really nice at one time when the mill was still working, and everybody that worked at the mill owned the houses and lived there. And was not a bad place to grow up at the time.
I've heard a bunch of people talk about. I talked to Jacob Travis about it not too long ago. He grew up out there.
Yep,
and,
him and Milt and all them grew up down there. Yep.
yeah. People talk about what a cool place that was to live, and wish it was still that way.
Yeah, if it was still that way, it would be. It'd mean the mill was still running,
Yeah.
But you talked about Jacob Travis. His dad, when my dad passed away, although I'd been out of school for a few years, Coach Travis Milt was the only former teacher that I had from Model that contacted me and said, "Hey, I'm sorry to hear about your dad."
Yeah.
And that's just the kind of person that he is. And I've got a lot of respect for Coach Travis. Always have.
Yeah.
He's always been good to me and respectful and never, even though I wasn't the best student, never looked at me any different than he did anybody else.
Milt knows he knew why he was there, and
Right.
it wasn't to make sure kids had perfect attendance and
Right.
good grades. I'll say there are very few humans walking the earth that are greater than Milt Travis. He's just a phenomenal human being.
And I seen him here a while back at the high school when I had to go over there to deal with something with my oldest knucklehead, and he talked to me then.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they live. Milt and Jacob both live just around the corner from me.
Okay.
I see them in passing quite a bit.
I know he had that 66 Mustang for a long time, and I always wanted to buy that car.
Yeah.
It had an inline six in it, and I'm like, and I asked him for a long time. I was like, "Can I buy it? What would you sell it for?" He's like, "Well, I didn't say I'd sell it." And then it was right after I got out of high school. It had a for sale sign on it in his yard, and I was like, "There's no way." I was like, "I want to buy that car so bad, but there's no way I can buy it right now."
Right.
But somebody got a really good car out of that.
Oh man, it's sad when you wait on a car and then it becomes available and you don't have the money at the time. That's happened to me no less than 10 times.
Yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah,
It is what it is.
that's how it goes. Well, man, you got anything else you want to dive into?
Oh man,
We've been at it almost 2 hours. I don't know if you realize
Have
that. Yeah, look at that. The ticker up there. That's how long it's been.
shoot. You got anything you got questions about? I can cover however long as you want to go.
You told some wild stories, man.
Yeah. I took a leave of absence from the city in 2010 to do military contract work. Initially, it was just supposed to be a teaching job to where I would create lesson plans for the Iraqi National Police, and then they would what's the word I'm looking for?
Translate, maybe?
They would translate it over
Yeah.
to the local dialect that they were using in that particular area. Then they found out I could shoot really well, so I got assigned a slot as a designated marksman.
Oh, wow.
So it took my pay rate from $495 a day to $875.
A day.
So, but I didn't get to do a whole year, which is not normally the way it goes. Right. I would love to have done a whole year, and it would have been tax free. But shortly after I got there, I was in Baghdad for a while. Then went to Talil Air Force Base, a little closer south in southern Iraq, not real south, but anyway. Started teaching at a joint training center outside Nazareth. And so the end of my contracting career happened outside of the training center when we had some folks get a hold of some Iraqi National Police uniforms, and they used that to bury some ordnance outside the school, and they set it off under my truck.
So we've circled back around now to where we were. I got you.
Yeah. So
Holy
this is where I ruptured both of my eardrums, and really bad on the left side. And so when that happened, I was in an MRAP, and it went, luckily, and here I am saying luckily. I got blown up, but luckily.
It wasn't so bad.
Yeah, it was more under the front wheel and the engine. And from where I was sitting, it's probably what kept me from getting really tore up.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I turned that thing over, and I kind of blacked out for a minute. And I was looking out the glass windows. It's Lexan glass, or at least I think it was Lexan glass, some kind of ballistic material.
Yeah.
You see this black plume. I'm like, oh, my God.
Something terrible's happening. What is
Yeah, and then I'm telling, so I was embedded with an artillery unit, which they're an artillery unit, but they were tasked with basically babysitting contractors to go in and teach. So I'd go in there and teach, and they'd just pull perimeter for a few hours.
Right.
And they're like, we like doing this because we get to go, to the air base and get haircuts and have good food and stuff.
Easy money.
At least a few days out of the week.
Yeah.
Because I had a CHU, combat housing unit, at Talil, and then stayed in one in as well. Now, was a crap hole. When I was in we'd 3 or 4 days at a time, I'd survive on beef jerky and apples and water.
Wow.
And, the captain there, he's like, and Major D, I'm not going to say his full name. They're like, anytime you want to go back to Talil, you let us know, and we'll task a mission out to go to Talil. They're like, are you ready to go back? I'm like, no, do y'all need to go back? They're like, only if you need to go back. And I'm like, okay, I feel like you want me to say, hey, let's go.
Yeah. And
so I said, just start tasking something out for every Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Yeah.
And that's what they'd do. And we'd go back to the air base, and, they'd eat little restaurant and stuff there.
Have good meals.
Little Italian restaurant stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, when we were in water was heavily rationed. Like, if you were going to go take a shower, it was like, cut the water on long enough to get wet, cut it off, soap up, cut it on long enough to get the soap off.
Yeah. And then you're done.
But back to the incident. Yeah, so after being blown up and kind of coming out of this being knocked out state, I'm like, hey, y'all got to get off me. We're on fire. I got two hefty Army guys laying across me. I'm like, y'all get off of me.
Yeah,
we're on fire.
We're burning up here.
And at the same time, I'm thinking, okay, I'm bleeding somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm feeling my chest, my legs and everything. And from my knees to here was soaked. I'm like, oh God, this is not good. And I keep looking. I'm like, well, there's nothing on my hand. But so what happened with that was we'd had a cooler on the truck for several days. It's an old igloo cooler.
Yeah.
That didn't really keep, heat fluctuation, especially inside the trucks, are hot.
Yeah.
So it was just hot water that poured over me. And I'm like, okay, that's good.
I can live with that. Yeah.
So we end up being on a pretty heavy engagement for a few hours until we had some reinforcements come and get us out of there. And then the company I was working for was like, hey, you have got to go and you've got to get cleared because you've got fluid running out of your ears.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that. I mean, it's not only that. It's like my balance was off, which sucked.
You start messing with your inner ear and all kinds of things go haywire.
But what really bothered me the most was the headache. Mm. It was 5 days before they had all the logistics put together to get me out of Iraq to get back to Atlanta. We went to 3 different airports in Iraq, two of them said, no, we can't put him on a plane. He don't have the right visa. So finally, we made it down to Basra, and they found a flight from Basra to Kuwait. And they're like, all right, you're going to go. Okay, all right, got it, check, going to Kuwait. You're going to go from Kuwait to Amsterdam. All right, check, going to Amsterdam. And by the time I got to Amsterdam, I'd been awake for 6 or 7 days with the same headache.
Yeah.
You know, taking ibuprofen. It's not helping nothing.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, this is killing me. Well, I get to Amsterdam and I'm in the airport and I'm like, hey, I've got this flight going from here to Atlanta and I need to sleep. What can y'all give me to sleep? And they're like, oh, here, you can buy this Ambien. And I'm like, all right, done.
Yeah, yeah.
So I get it, and I get me a big bottle of water, and I go sit next to my gate, and they're like, yeah, your flight don't even board for like 5 hours. Ugh. And I told the guys, like, look, I'm going to take this so I can go to sleep. So when they start boarding, let me know.
Yeah.
So I did. I took 2 Ambien, and I laid in the floor on my pack, and it seemed like it was only like 2 or 3 minutes. And then that dude was like, nudging me. He's like, hey, you got to get on the plane. You're the last one. You got to get it. I'm like, okay. And I remember getting on the plane and I'm like, oh, I got to go back to sleep. Mm-hmm. Then the next thing I remember, we're in Atlanta and the stewardess is like, hey, you got to get off the plane. You're the last one. And I'm like, okay.
Doing my best here, lady.
And I had planned on going and seeing, used to be Dr. Walker was an ENT guy here. Mm-hmm. He's since moved to Florida. I was going to go to him and get cleared for my ears. But, you know, I'd been gone a couple months. And I got home and Bo, my oldest one, he was only 2 at the time. And he crawled up in my lap and sit there. I sat down in a recliner. And held on to me and would not. I mean, he didn't even want me to get up to go to the bathroom. He thought I was leaving. Mm-hmm. I was like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
I was like, it's like I'd planned on doing a year, coming back, you know, thinking to myself, you know what? He's so young, you don't really have that much of a sense of time.
Right.
'Cause I look back, you know, I don't remember things from when I was 2 or 3.
Yeah.
But right then in the moment at 2 or 3, you're going to remember it.
Yeah.
Which is what I found out when I come back. And I told Brandy, I was like, I'm not going back. Yeah. Like, I'm sending my resignation right now. And luckily, the city hired me back. And, I'd been going there 3 or 4 months. And they hired me back and put it down as a leave of absence. And, I really appreciated that. And, later on, when Brandy decided, what do you think about me going into the Air Force to do radiology? And she's like, I really want you to go to school for something that you want to do. Yeah. And she's like, we were talking, she's like, you're burnt out on this law enforcement thing. And I'm like, I get it. And I understand. Yeah. And I was like, if you decide to do that, we'll do that. And she did. So, I started notifying them. I said, hey, she's in training now. When she's done, this is, this finally it come down to, my last day is September 1st. And the closer it kept getting, I started thinking about all these horror stories about people, getting ready to retire or leave. Yeah. And something happening. And, cause originally I was going to leave on the 10th, but the first rolled around, I was like, and, I went to, Rodney Bailey and, told him, I said, man, I'm calling it today. I said, I'm kind of worried about something. He's like, yeah. He said, we didn't get to throw you a party or nothing. I said, I'm all right with that.
I'm good with it. Yeah.
I said, I'm all right with that. And a lot of respect for Rodney.
Rodney's a solid dude.
He always, in my experience, has sat back and let things digest when there was a problem.
Yeah.
in order to make the right call, and has never made a shotgun reaction.
Right.
At least with me and several other people that I've seen. And I know he's had to make some hard decisions in his career, and just say I got a lot of respect for him.
No, Rodney's a good dude.
And he told me when I left, he said, you left one time, and because this is military related, I don't think it's going to close the door on you if you ever want to come back. And I didn't think it would either. And back before I had the shoulder issue and really messed up on that motorcycle, I had tossed around the idea about going back to work for the city. Man, I talked to people that I knew who are investigators, people that I had trained at FTO who are supervision now, all the way up to one of the majors, excuse me. And even out at training, talked to a guy at training. He's like, man, you always got a home here. Everybody was on board.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? I said, I may go ahead and do this. So I kind of feel like, I got a little bit of time left. But I told everybody that I talked to, specifically a captain that I talked to, I said, I know people are going to remember the way I was.
Yeah.
So, but I want you to understand now, at my age, I'm not looking to shake the trees and see what falls out.
Right.
So, I want to come out here, I want to do my job, I want to work some traffic, do my reports and everything, but I'm not going to be out here shaking the trees to try to get into stuff.
Right.
If the night's a little slow.
Yeah.
So that's just not, that's not me anymore. Mainly because now, like, a good training session now takes me 4 days to recover from.
Yeah. No more foot chases in the woods.
I sure as heck don't want to be fighting with somebody.
Right.
Not that, if I had to, I would.
Right.
But, and I was told by one of the administrators to call HR and see what your hire rate would be back in at, because they've got your file and all this.
Right.
Them jokers called me back and said, yeah, we talked to the chief, and she said there's an unwritten rule that once you leave twice, you can't come back.
Unwritten rule.
Yeah, which
So not a real rule.
Yeah, if it's an unwritten rule, it's not a rule.
Right.
And I was thinking to myself, well, I know 2 officers there now in the last little bit that have left and come back twice. I said, and I told the girl in HR, I said, does she not understand the second time I left was military related, although it was not my service?
Right.
That she can't expect me to just say, okay, y'all go do this for the next 8 years and me keep working at the city.
I'll just stay here. Yeah.
Of course, I was also told if I wanted to pitch a fit about it, it would probably go my way.
Yeah, I imagine so. They're always begging folks to sign up.
And at the time, I was told that they were 19 officers short.
Ooh.
And it was, yeah, we'd love to have you back. I think we're 19 officers short right now.
19.
Which they've hired about 7.
Yeah. So they're 12 down now.
I guess. I don't know how many down there are.
Oh.
But, I still have I still got a lot of friends that I talk to there.
Yeah.
And, I still got their back. I still want them to be safe.
Yeah.
And I don't want to put everything on the chief with her saying I can't come back. Yeah, I left the second time. First time I left is because, saw dollar signs.
Right.
Second time was not really a choice. It was more like, go with your family or don't. But what kind of person are you if your
family moves to Guam and you don't go with them? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't Guam to begin with. We went Ohio, Texas, and then Guam, which Guam was great.
Stick around here for $30,000. I mean.
Yeah. But also, I think the chief probably remembers the way I was being an aggressive officer, going out and working.
Yeah.
Not having a lot of a filter.
Right.
Saying what's on my mind, regardless of who's standing there.
Yeah.
Sammy Rich, I apologize for that one time many years ago that you probably don't even remember now.
Yeah.
With the school buses in front of the city auditorium. Sorry.
Oh, man. God bless Sammy.
But yeah, you know, she probably remembers a lot of my being abrasive when I taught. I've been told I'm abrasive or too blunt, or maybe even, I was told once by Rodney Bailey himself. He's like, sometimes you're a little too militant. And I'm like, looking back now, I can see that.
Yeah, yeah.
And, when I was told I couldn't come back because I was like, if I get back in the saddle at Rome, it'll be like riding a bicycle.
Right.
Learn their new programs that they got for doing their reports and stuff. No big deal.
Yeah.
Can get back out, get my feet back under me, start FTOing again, and stuff like that. But, that door is closed, and not going to lie, I was bitter for a few days about it. My wife's probably going to say a few weeks, but it was a few days. And ultimately, if I can get up at the school where I want to end up, I think it's going to be beneficial, because I'm at a point that I feel like my knowledge, my training, and my experience needs to go to the new people who are coming out on the road, who are young and able to, to get after it.
You don't have a bunch of foot chases left in you, but you can tell somebody else how to do it. No,
if I got to get in a foot chase, then something is going very, very wrong.
Yeah.
But
you get to a point, and you're not the only guy I know that's kind of gone down a little bit of a similar path. That's moved into a training role now, and like it's the same kind of thing. I ain't out kicking down doors anymore.
Right.
But I got this knowledge and this experience that's going to benefit somebody.
Right. Especially with like the pit maneuvers. Although I don't agree with it being in mandate, I love teaching it.
Yeah.
I won't wear the fist suit to do defensive tactics instruction anymore. I'll let somebody that's got two good shoulders do that.
Yeah.
But I can still teach it.
Right.
Even with, a prosthetic joint, if something happened and I needed to defend myself, I'd be able to. It's not something I'm going to seek out to do. It's not something I want to do all the time.
Right.
Just for the longevity of it in itself, But I honestly feel like being in a training role is going to be where I see myself. I feel like that's where I'm going to be more beneficial to today's law enforcement.
Yeah.
Could I work the road? Yeah, I could. No problems.
Yeah.
I just feel like training's a better fit at this point.
Yeah. Well, that's part of that wisdom and maturity, right? That you know now that this is what I'm a little more geared toward. And you could do the other thing. You could do it, and it'd be okay, probably. But even maybe for the short term, you don't want to do it for 10 more years.
No.
But you might do this for 20 more years.
Yeah, I can tell you now, and I told them when I went through the interview with GNTC that if you get me in that police academy up there, you're going to bring me out of there in a body bag.
Yeah.
That's
ride it out.
I used to teach up there a lot with DTs and stuff with John Walters and them. And I'd wear that fist suit through a whole class.
Yeah.
And that's when we would spray them, and then they'd have to fight with you to get to their water.
Yeah.
Although it would be 30 seconds. 30 seconds is a long time when you're on fire.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But now they don't tase them or pepper spray them in the academy anymore.
Really?
So, yeah, they leave that up to the agencies now.
Okay. So it still gets done. It's just
done with the agencies, yeah. I mean, they still have their DT portion of stuff, but yeah, they're not getting pepper sprayed or tased anymore.
Man, God bless them.
Yeah. But it's definitely a big change now that mandate has gone from 400 hours to 800 and something. It doubled after January. So now agencies are going to spend twice as much to get you mandated.
Right.
Which they're taking care of a lot of mandatory stuff that the state says, hey, this has got to be done. You've got like yearly stuff that even after you're mandated, you've got yearly classes you have to take to keep your mandate.
Right.
So, you'll hear people say, oh, that we need better trained police. And I'm going to tell you right now, Them jokers are training all the time,
Yeah.
whether it be computer-based training or hands-on training. They've got a minimum during the year just to keep their mandate.
Right.
But then you also have like Rome. One of the good things they do is the way they do their in-service training. It's constant. You don't have to worry about a Rome PD officer being behind on training hours. If they're behind on training hours, they're doing something wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the training staff, kudos to the training staff. They've always been they've been so heavy on training at Rome PD, you get sick of training, but it's beneficial.
If you get sick of training, I mean, yeah, as long as it's beneficial.
Well, you have people like me that try to go to every bit of training you can get, every kind of specialized certification you can get.
Right.
And they get to a point where they're like, hey, we need to let somebody else go to training for a while. And then you have the people that's like, I don't want to go to training. I just want to do the bare minimum. And that's not just Rome PD. I'm not just knocking Rome PD. That's everywhere.
Yeah, well, it's just people, man. You got your guys that are going to try to slide by on the minimum. And Edgar talked about that in the last episode. He's like, man, you could always shoot more. You know, if you're going to have to pull that thing out, it means business, and you better be good at it.
Oh, yeah. And luckily, on this side of the planet, I've never had to discharge my firearm while working. Now, I had really two very, very close occasions.
Yeah.
Both of them at the time when we were carrying a 5906 Smith & Wesson with Rome PD, and I'm glad we were, because the first trigger pull is so heavy. I think it was like 8 to 10 pounds, where your Glock is like 5.
Right.
Remember Thanksgiving morning, 2008. You got a detective now that works at Rome. He'll probably remember this very vividly. Down on South Blanche Avenue, we got a call about a domestic like 4:00 in the morning.
Y'all chill on Thanksgiving, man.
Yeah. Well, I pull up, and this rather short, wide woman was standing next to a rather tall, skinny dude.
Okay.
Dude, she pulls out this friggin' hog leg revolver, and she gives it to him, and he runs after the dude on the porch, chases him in the house. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
Here we go.
And that was at the same time that the other officer was pulling up. He got out of his car and sees this guy chasing another guy, and we get to the gate at the same time. He gets in the front door just ahead of me. And I'll never forget this poor woman sitting on her couch. She must have been in her 80s. And she's like bug-eyed, looking like, what is going on in my house? And you can't talk to her. You got a guy that just ran in here with a revolver after somebody. And
no time to explain.
The other officer dives into the bedroom and goes, he's got a gun. Well, he dove into the bedroom in the hallway, but when he did, it blocked my way. I can't get in there.
Oh.
So I'm like, and I've got my little flashlight out, and I dropped my flashlight because where I'm going's lit.
Yeah.
And I went ahead and clamped down good on that Smith & Wesson. Well, as soon as I entered their dining room, which was like a center section of the house, that dude was standing there with this revolver at the low ready, and he was looking down at it. And then he looked up at me, and I'm already aimed at him.
Yeah.
And we're 10 feet away. I'm like, damn, I ain't no way I can miss. And I'm like, hey, I'm giving you commands. You need to drop it, let it go, drop it.
Yeah.
Well, he looked down at it again. Then he looked up at me again. And it was like, we made eye contact, and I'm still giving him commands, and he looked down at this revolver again. And I'm like, all right, he's about to start raising this thing up. I said, it's time to go.
Yeah. And
he looked up at me the third time, and I knew 100%. I'm like, I'm fixing to have to shoot this guy. His name's Danny Lee Darden, and I don't know if he's still alive or not. But I'll tell you the conversation we had at the jail afterwards. When he looked up at me that third time, I had already transitioned my finger from the slide to the trigger. And I was putting pressure on the trigger because I'm like, this dude's fixing to try and shoot me.
You're going to get
I knew 100% he's going to try to shoot me. And that Smith & Wesson, I can see the hammer coming back slow. And I'm like,
man.
and I'm thinking to myself, just drop it, just drop it. And I'm done talking at this point.
Yeah.
I'm like, come on, man, just drop it, just drop it. And he was staring at me, and he goes,
just lets it go.
and he lets it go. And I threw my finger off the trigger like that because that hammer was already coming back.
Yeah.
So I was like trying my quickest to get my finger off the trigger to the point I thought I was going to throw my gun at him, but
Right.
it was like, and when he dropped it, he kicked it under the table there, and I was like, okay, I don't know what that was for, but all right, I'll take it.
Yeah.
And as I'm holstering, I reach out and I grab him and I snatch him to the floor and I handcuff him. He didn't say nothing else. Didn't say a word. Didn't say nothing at all. And the other officer handcuffed that female. She turned out to be a Department of Corrections officer from Hayes.
Okay.
Was.
Yeah.
So we get up to the jail and I'm filling out this guy's information. And he said, Officer Robinson? I said, yes, sir. He said, I appreciate you for not killing me. He said, I knew you was fixing to. And I was like, okay, you're welcome.
Yeah, I was about to. Yeah.
And I'm telling you, that was the closest I ever been here.
Yeah.
So then I got one more. You remember do you remember the old surplus store on North Broad Street?
Oh, Army surplus store? Yeah.
When that guy was running that thing, he kept having people kick in the back door. They were kicking blocks out.
Yeah.
And they'd come in there and steal from him. Well, his idea of securing it was to slide a filing cabinet in front of it. Yeah. So that call come out one night that, hey, the alarm's going off. So Brick's been kicked out again. We call him up there. It's like, hey, you need to secure all this. So he slid a filing cabinet in front of it. About an hour later, hey, that alarm at the Army-Navy store is going off again. So me and John Black and John Sisson and Sean Davis go up there. And that filing cabinet's out of the way. It's like, we know somebody's in there.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, Sean, watch that hole right there. So Sean standing there with a shotgun watching that hole. Me and John Black go inside. I'm like, hey, the alarms have been ripped off the wall. That was recent because that wasn't like that earlier. Earlier,
Right.
the alarm was going off and you can hear it.
Yeah.
I said, I'm going to go flip the light switch. And I start hearing, show me your hands, show me your hands. And it was John Black giving this guy commands. And dude took off to the back of the store. Poked his head out of the hole and got met with a 12-gauge shotgun.
Uh-huh.
So he decided to run back in the store. And he come running down the aisle, and I've got my flashlight and that 5906 like this. And he's illuminated from like here up. I can't see nothing else. He'd already broke the display counter, took guns out of it, and all this stuff. And he comes running down the aisle at me. I'm like, you better stop. And I'm like, stop. Show me your hands.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, no. I'm like, okay. This dude, he gets about 2 feet away from me, and I'm about to, you know, drop the hammer.
Yeah.
This joker goes, and then did like a football shuffle to go around, jumped over the, when he did that, he went behind the counter, jumped over the counter and tried to go out the door. Well, he ran into the arms of everybody else.
Right, yeah.
And see, when we got him to the ground and got him handcuffed and everything, he had 5 different handguns and all the ammunition for each of them on his person. Turned out to be a 16-year-old juvenile. Big gash on his hand from breaking open the glass in the cabinet.
Yeah.
And so there's a process when you deal with a juvenile. to get them put in the YDC. We called and they're like, oh, he don't have enough points to go to YDC.
Points?
Yeah, so it was on a point system at the time. I hope it's changed. I don't know at this point. Like, he don't have enough points to go. We're like, hang on. So this is charging with burglary, 5 counts of obstruction, possession of firearm during the commission of a crime.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, well, let's think about this for a minute. So we're going to have to do these individual charges for every firearm just to get him to the YDC.
Right.
And then we had to call him back like, look, you understand he's stealing all these firearms and all this with ammunition. So it took some come to Jesus meeting with the intake officer for them to say, yeah, take him to YDC.
Right.
Of course, when they go to YDC, you have to turn around and go to a court hearing within a relatively short amount of time. We're all third shift officers, so I think we went in the next 4 or 5 days or something, or maybe sometime within 7 to 10. I don't remember exactly how it was. But those are the 2 times within the city of Rome that I legitimately thought I was going to have to shoot somebody. Not that I want to.
No. But man, you can see the hammer coming back. That's how close you were.
Yeah, the one at the house on South Blanche was a lot closer than the one at the Army store.
Yeah.
But had I been carrying a Glock and not a Smith & Wesson,
oh yeah,
that little bit of poundage I think is the difference.
Yeah. Holy smokes, man, that's wild stuff.
I mean, yeah, it is, and I reflect back on some of it from time to time. There are some things that that stuff that you share with people, and they're like, "Oh wow, that's cool."
Yeah.
But then there's other things that's like you kind of hold to yourself because they do bother you.
Yeah.
Anything like anything dealing with small kids has always been difficult. And even worse after I had my own.
Yeah.
And that's just the price of doing business sometimes.
Yeah.
And my poor wife, I still, she'll wake me up sometimes because even now, and I don't realize I'm doing it, is when I'm sleeping, I'll yell in my sleep and stuff like that. And sometimes she's like, "Who are you yelling at? Or who are you chasing?" I'm like, "I don't know."
Yeah.
Like I don't remember, what I'm dreaming about. And every now and again, I'll wake myself up and I'm in the middle of saying something. I'm like, what is going on?
What am I even talking about?
Yeah.
Do you know Andrew Denman?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Andrew and I have at least semi-regular conversations about, such things. He's an EMT and he's into, he sees all this stuff and talks about how you carry it with you, whether you like it or not,
And you do. And if somebody says they don't, then I have a lot of trouble believing that. And I know it affects everybody different. And I don't think it was always like that for me. It was, as I've gotten older, it has been something that has, I don't want to say reared its head, but I have, there's no doubt there's some PTSD there, but it's not anything like, I don't agree with taking medication for certain stuff. Some people do, and if it works for you, that's fine.
Right.
I'm not against it.
Sure.
But I don't like to take anything that is going to alter my brain chemicals. And that's just the way I look at it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I kind of tell my wife is I don't have those issues during the day where I relive stuff. There's some things I think about, but I'm not like reliving stuff. There's only been twice that something has bothered me during the day. One of them, I turned pale white and almost passed out in my kitchen because I got real queasy. And back in 2015, we had a guy on Kingston Avenue that cut his leg off with a chainsaw. I mean, the only thing that was holding it on was a little fat in the back.
Yee.
And I got there before Andy Rast. He got there shortly afterwards. But we ended up using, there was 3 guys there. We ended up using one of them's hoodie as a tourniquet. And I reached under the back of his leg to grab one of the sleeves to the hoodie. And when I did, I realized that I was grabbing the bone on his leg and I could feel where it had been cut up.
Yeah.
So anyway, we got a knot tied in it and then took one of the sticks and tied it up. And then a stick ended up breaking on us. So we ended up turning it and just holding it there. And I held that there. Didn't seem like forever, but it was enough that like from my elbows to my fingertips got like numb.
Right.
And this is one of those things that sucks about law enforcement. And people probably, when they hear this, are going to think negative about what I'm about to say. Is I didn't know that guy from anybody else, but I was willing to help him.
Yeah.
But what I found out later on, a couple of years later, after I left the city, is I see that guy's face in the newspaper, and he's being arrested for trying to arrange a sexual meeting with an underage female. And I've said this out loud, and it is just my thought process, was that had I known then what I know now, I probably would have let him bleed to death.
Yeah.
And I've told that to a couple people, and I've had a couple people say, "Oh, no, you wouldn't." And I'm like, I absolutely would.
If you had known, yeah.
Had I known?
Yeah.
But in the moment, I didn't know.
Right.
So I did, I did what was right at the time.
Right.
And that's one of those things you look back on, and it's, man, if I could have done something different,
Yeah.
he wouldn't have been here with us because he's trying to arrange a meeting with an underage female. Mm-hmm. He just happened to get caught this time.
Right.
That don't mean he hasn't done it before.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a reason I think that the Lord doesn't let us know everything, or we find out in a different period of time or whatever.
I agree with you.
That's a tough one though, man.
But that incident, we were getting ready to do some barbecuing. I can't remember if it was just because or whatever, but I had washed off a pork butt and I was patting rub on it. And as soon as I slapped that bone in there, it was like, and like I was standing at the sink, I just kind of froze.
Yeah.
And everything rushed back. I hadn't even thought about it.
Yeah.
Since the incident happened. And everything rushed back, and my wife's like, "Are you okay? Hey, are you okay?" She had to get my attention.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "I got to go sit down." And she's like, "You're really pale." And I'm like, "I think I'm going to pass out." And she's like, "What's wrong?" I was like, "You're going to have to finish doing this."
Yeah.
And it was just, hadn't happened again.
Unless you smoke meat all the time, stuff, right? Like this is a regular thing for you.
Yeah. And I think that was probably about 4 months after.
Yeah.
And hasn't happened again, but it was just like, it was just weird.
Yeah.
And that was, that's one of the times that something has bothered me during the day. The other one I won't talk about.
Is that something you've ever looked for help for?
Luckily, my 2 boys, their godfather is a psychologist. And I've reached out to him a couple times and talked to him. I went through, after I had my shoulder replacement, actually, I went through a time to where I went a little over a week not really sleeping a lot.
Yeah.
And it was because I was waking myself up in my sleep screaming and yelling and not knowing why.
Yeah.
And so we discussed a few things, and he's like, "Hey, you remember, we'd do this before your fights when you used to fight. He said, try that before you go to bed. I was like, you know what? I'll give that a shot.
Yeah.
And it was just like it's like a relaxation thing. And the first night I slept like a baby. I was like, okay. So if it starts happening again, that's a tool I'm going to use to go back.
Oh man. So there's stuff that's not. I mean, I guess the easy thing to do is to take medicine or whatever. But there are things out there, techniques or whatever that's not medicine.
Right. Yeah, and I'm not. I see. I watch a lot of podcasts, talk, especially with a lot of veterans and stuff, and I've looked at the ones that have like gone out and did like the ayahuasca or whatever, and they're like, hey, it's life changing, and I'm like, I just don't know.
Yeah.
But I know people in Rome that have gone out, not related to law enforcement stuff, but have gone out and they've not ayahuasca, but the other whatever
psilocybin.
Yeah,
Dakota Meyer talks about that.
Yes, psilocybin, and they're like, man, it's like life changing. And
that's what he said. Yeah,
and I'm like, granted, I have not had a bad day like Dakota Meyer.
Right. And very few people have.
And I 100% agree with him that if I were in his shoes, how are you going to give me an award for the worst day of my life?
Yeah.
I wouldn't want it.
Right.
And I know it's something that he don't necessarily want.
Yeah.
It's like I got the officer of the month for the whole chainsaw thing. I appreciate it.
That's great.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
I appreciate the little medal you gave me.
Yeah.
But it took me 2 hours to get the guy's blood off of me. Terry Autry, retired now, captain. He come by the hospital with me and Andy Rast. He's like, y'all need anything? I'm like, I just need to get back to the station. I don't have any clothes to wear.
Yeah.
I got my T-shirt and I've got my pants, but I'm going to have to get in my car with these pants. I'm like, and we're covered in somebody else's DNA.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and then the Fox 5 interview, I was like, and different chief at the time. I'm like, I'll do it and I'll talk about it, but I don't think it's the recognition I need.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what you're talking real life stuff now. We see that in a movie. Yeah. Where you tie a tourniquet on a guy's leg and you save his life and then close scene.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not reality.
Yeah. And you don't see the things that go wrong. Like when I turned into that area to pull up in the grass, I had pre-staged a tourniquet on my seat out of my carrier.
Yeah.
When I turned, it rolled off the seat. And somehow or another, got caught under the seat. Like I was yanking on it and couldn't get it. And I was like, okay, I need to abandon this and go over there.
Right.
And luckily it worked out at the time.
Yeah. As far as we knew, right?
As far as we knew at the time, it worked out.
Yeah.
And and you got officers all over the city of Rome and the county that, they get life-saving awards and stuff, and you don't hardly ever hear about them. Yeah. You'll hear about them every now and again. Whichever one gets Officer of the Year is the one you're going to hear about. But, you may have, look at Chad Matthews. He's a life-saving rabbit, buddy. I'm going to tell you what, that joker seems to be at the right place at the right time very often. Yeah.
Well, I know there was the car wreck in front of the Braves Stadium where it was Dal Turrentine and Evan Roden.
Yep.
They pulled somebody out of like a burning car or whatever, and it was a big deal. But other than that, you don't hear about it. Right. Every now and then something pops up and makes it in the newspaper, but you just don't, most of the time, you don't know it.
And, and it's a lot of people out there expect the police to be robots.
Yeah.
They don't think, all cops are bad. You're a bootlicker if you like the police. Yeah. It's like, oh, come on, dude. Tell me about your criminal history.
Yeah. But you get in these videos, and it happens to me sometimes on Facebook. You watch a video, and the next one just pops up, and it's these people having interactions with police, and there's a bad one. The cop mishandles it, and 2, 3, 4 of those, and you think, well, man, maybe all cops are bad. And then you see the next one pops up, and he saved somebody's life. And
Right.
Go, okay, all right.
Yeah, and
You get what the algorithm gives you.
you know, if you got the right person that's going to get under your skin, you're going to lose your temper. You're only human.
Yeah.
And I can promise you, by the time that the majority of police lose their temper, it has been,
Yeah.
they have been packing that away for a while.
Yeah.
You know, people need to understand the police are human. They have emotions. And yes, they're held to a higher standard.
Yeah.
That, you know, they do the best they can with what they got. Some of it, a lot of it is experience. The more experience they got, the better they're going to handle something.
Yeah.
But they're not going to come right out of the gate with that experience.
Right.
And what I would like to relay to some of the newer officers, even some of the older ones that may be, especially anybody that's going to have officer-involved shootings and things that are traumatic, is you can't pack that away.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times something would happen at work, and I might not come home and tell my wife about it. People at work know about it.
And you come home and burden your wife with that?
Yeah, you know, you can't relate to people who are not doing the job.
Right.
So it makes it more difficult because nobody understands.
Yeah.
And even though I was in Iraq for that short time, when I come back, I struggled for a while. And, you know, I talked to my kid's godfather off and on pretty regular because my thing was this. I said, Doc, how can I not be ashamed of myself for not feeling any remorse for taking somebody's life? During that whole thing in Iraq, you know, that happened. And, you know, with nothing big, nothing fancy about it. Probably 20-year-old kid, I guess. You know, and I stayed mad at myself and ashamed for a long time because I had no remorse for it.
Yeah.
Because, like, you're trying to take me away from my wife and kid.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care about you. But my mother, God rest her soul, was a very biblical woman, very religious.
Yeah.
You know, thou shalt not kill. Just the way I was brought up.
Yeah.
Then it clicked one day. It was about 2 years later. I was talking to somebody that had gone through something similar, and I asked him the same thing. It's like, I've been taught this all my life. And he said, that's a messed up translation. I said,
yeah.
What?
I was going to wait and see if you got around to that.
I said, well, what are you talking about? He said, when they translated from the Old Testament to the New Testament, it said, thou shalt not murder.
Yeah.
Now it says, thou shalt not kill.
Yeah.
He said, well, what is murder? He said, it's when you kill somebody because you have hate or malice in your
Yeah,
heart.
it's malice, yeah.
He said, did you hate that person? I said, I didn't even know that person.
Right.
I said, they chose to do something, and I defended myself.
Yeah.
And they're very clear when you get a contracting job in Iraq, you're going to be armed and you're not a force multiplier. If you're going to, as a contractor, your weaponry is for defense use only.
Right.
And I'm going to quote that.
Yeah.
Because they're like, you still bound by the Geneva Convention.
Yeah.
And so you can't just go out there and start, executing people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I was talking to this person, and, he said that when he said that, it was like a light bulb went off. I'm like, I didn't know that person. I defended myself. And I was mad. I was mad at myself, like very, very mad at myself for not having any remorse.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I'm in the wrong for not having any remorse for something that was beyond my control.
Yeah.
That's the way I still look at it.
Well, you think about it. I mean, somebody walks in that door right now and is going to shoot one, some, or all of us, you know, the three of us that are in here, and one of us shoots him, then we all get to go home. Well, we didn't ask that guy to come in here. You know what I mean? It's the difference between killing and murder.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember, we were talking once upon a time, I guess it was in Facebook Messenger, and you were talking maybe about this thing. You didn't go into any details, and you were like, we talked about church and God and a few other things, and you're like, I may be past the point now. I feel like I've done things.
Yeah, that was another thing too. My mother-in-law would love to see me and my wife come to church more. And my wife wants to go to church. She really does. Mm-hmm. And I have a good relationship with Pastor Hall, Derek Hall up at Northwood.
Yeah.
Have a good relationship with him, but I'm still stuck on, and some of it's probably living in the past, but I'm still stuck on when I go to church, I feel like I'm not a good person, that church is for good people, not for people like me. And that's, and you have people say, well, Rick, you're not a bad person. And I'm like, you don't know everything.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So, and it's hard to explain. Of course, now anybody that watches this is going to maybe understand a little bit more why I feel that way.
Sure.
And I'm trying to get over that. I know there's a place for spiritual healing and just because I don't go to a brick and mortar church doesn't mean that I don't have my talks with God when I need to.
Yeah. Well,
probably not as much as I should.
Yeah.
But
I don't either, Rick. I mean, I don't either.
You know, if I go a day or two and go to bed and I don't want to say forget to pray or I don't pray.
Yeah.
You know, the next night I might be like, you know what, I need to pray a little bit before I go to bed because I didn't yesterday.
Yeah. But you know what you get from going to church, and it's not that you have to be a good person to walk in the door, or feel like you are. Number one, there are no good people. We do good things, but we're born in this imperfect flesh, and we're plenty capable of all sorts of bad stuff. The guy standing in the front of the room delivering the message on Sunday has done his share of bad stuff. And it may not look the same as yours, but it's his. Yeah. But what you're going to get there is you're going to meet some other guy who's a vet and had been through, down some of the same roads that you've been down, or, maybe he's a cop, or he's, he lost his parents in some, odd way or whatever. Yeah. He experienced his own tragedy. That's why you go to church. It's not because you're a good person or because you got it all figured out or whatever, but it's because you have that community.
Right. Yeah, it's just, something like I said, I'm trying to get over. And
oh, man, and one of the hardest things in the world to do is walk through the front doors of a church that you've never been in before. That's insanely hard. I think
since we've been back from Guam, I've only been like maybe twice.
Yeah. It's tough, and it shouldn't be. It should be, in theory, it should be super easy. It's not. It's a hard thing to do.
Yeah. And then, carrying guilt for certain things.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know this, and they're probably going to hate me when I don't know if they'll hate me.
Nah.
So, Barry Sutton.
Yeah.
He worked with the same contractor I did after the fact. And there were some questions about his background that they had, and he needed a couple people to write letters of recommendations. Mm-hmm. Well, I was like, I'll write you one.
Yeah.
And one of his supervisors, Wade, he passed on a couple years ago now, not military related, but he was back home when Wade passed away. But I got a letter to Wade, and that's ultimately how Barry got hired. So the day before our youngest son's second birthday is when Barry got killed.
What's that? That's been 7, 8 years ago now.
It was August 22nd, 2015.
Okay, 10 years ago almost.
I started seeing stuff on Facebook. I'm like, what's going on here? Mm-hmm. So I called Jacob Pledger, and he told me what happened, and I just hung up the phone on him. And me and Brandy and the kids were in the car, and I'm like, man, it tore me up because maybe had I not written that letter, they wouldn't have hired him. But at the same time, he knew the risk versus the reward.
Yeah.
As well as I did.
And Barry was a good dude. Somebody else would have written that letter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He would have found
and I'm
else
sure
to do it.
and I'm sure that he got more than just mine.
Yeah.
But I also knew that mine went to somebody that had moved into a supervisory position.
Right.
So I mean, maybe it carried more merit, maybe it didn't. But I still remember Barry coming to me and saying, "Hey, do you have any contacts? You know, can you reach out to somebody? Can you write me a letter?" I'm like, "I'll get you a letter to somebody I was in Baghdad with, who is now a supervisor."
Yeah.
And it was a couple years before that happened, but
so Barry already knew what happened to you over there. So I mean, he knew,
we
like
had
you said,
talked
he knew
about
what
it.
he was getting, and that doesn't make it easier for me to say. He knew what he was getting into.
Yeah, we had talked about it. I told him it could be rough. I said, but if you get in with a good unit, you're not going to have to worry about a lot of stuff. Right. And unfortunately, you had a suicide bomber running between their convoys. What happened to them?
Yeah.
Because I remember Wade calling me, and or when I found out, I emailed Wade, and Wade called me, and it was not too much of a discussion on the phone, but it was very heartbroken and solemn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's the way things go. It seems like.
Yeah, they are, and you can say that and kind of, get through it.
There's always something that we can wish we've done something different that we did or didn't do different. You know? And I've said before that, if I had to do it again, I'd have never went into law enforcement. And if somebody hears me say that, it's a lie.
Who would you be without that?
It's a lie. I've enjoyed my law enforcement career. I mean, there's had some frustrations. I had a gap in service, when we did this military thing, but I was fortunate enough that I have the ability to just talk to people, and sometimes things work themselves out. Like when we first moved to Texas, I was kind of going to school, but I was kind of itching to do something. I was kind of, I was missing being on the road and stuff. Yeah. And I went to the Medina Annex at Lackland Air Force Base, and went in there, and I said, "What are all them folks doing out there?" And they said, "Oh, that's the folks coming in for the PJ indoctrination." I said, "Oh, okay, cool." And I'm not going to say I weaseled my way into getting to watch a lot of it, but it kind of, I could go into the gym and work out, and then I could watch what they were doing and watch how hard they were working. And I appreciated just that.
Yeah.
And then our neighbors in Texas, which Brian Nelson he is a warrior's warrior. Mm-hmm. That joker he's still on active duty. was blown up outside Bagram in Afghanistan, suffered some severe burns. His wife's going to retire from the Air Force this year, but Brian is still doing his thing. But that joker, he went through hell, and he could have taken 100% retirement if he wanted to.
Yeah.
And he's not said that, and he wouldn't take credit for it. But we lost 6 warriors that day when that happened. And when we were in Guam, they had a memorial hike up Taragi Beach. This freaking hill goes up like this for a mile.
Yeah.
So they do that for them every year. But I got to meet him, and at the time he's training security forces, and he's like, "Hey, I'm gonna see about getting you in here for role playing and stuff."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Okay, cool." The only problem was never could work it out because I was in school at the time getting my A&P license.
Right.
But I would like to have went out to Camp Bullis and done that. It would have been cool.
Yeah.
And even though, it's my wife's military career, she's like, you talk to everybody and you know everybody. And,
Yeah.
and we do, we've made a lot of good relationships over the past, 8-9 years.
Yeah.
Like lifelong relationships. It was funny. We got to Guam and started meeting our neighbors, and met this dude with a French last name, and come to find out he's from Calhoun.
Oh yeah. Okay. All the way out in Texas.
Yeah, no, that's in Guam.
On Guam, you say. Okay.
Yeah, but they're out in California now.
Yeah.
He's actually he's on a rotation to Cyprus right now, so he's living it up. He said.
Yeah.
I told him, I said, go by Beirut on your way back and see if you can get us a souvenir. He's like, I think I'm good.
Yeah, I'm pass on that.
But there was a lot about law enforcement that I missed, and I was talking to John Walters. He's like, "Yeah, Paul Weber asked me when you was gonna stop worrying about police," and then it had been like 2 years later. I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm trying.
Yeah.
But it's something that once it's in your blood, it never leaves you. I honestly can say that.
Well, there's people just wired a certain way, and some folks are just wired to be in law enforcement.
Yeah.
And even if you get out of it, you're still wired that way.
Yeah. I'd went to work for the sheriff's office right when we come back. Mm-hmm. And the reason me and the kids come back is I'd been talking to my mom on the phone. Something didn't seem right, and I thought, maybe she's, under the weather or something. And we came back home May 15th, 23. And I realized that she was not being as truthful as she should have been as far as her health goes.
Yeah.
And kind of went downhill pretty quick. She passed away July 27th, the same year.
Yeah.
We'd planned on going back to Guam, but the kids were already enrolled in school. I was working at the sheriff's office. I think I was there for 6 weeks, and they let me test for corporal when I got promoted to supervisor, and probably would still be there. But I ended up going back to Guam for a little while with Brandy and trying to help get some stuff squared away for her to move back.
Yeah.
I have nothing negative to say about the sheriff's office either. I mean, those guys up there, Dave, Bob, Alan Pledger, Nathan Blanton, Scott Knight, all my supervisors and everybody stood by me when I was going through that with my mother, and I could not be more appreciative.
Yeah. I don't know most of those guys. I've gotten to spend a little bit of time with Dave Robertson, and he comes across like a solid guy.
He is. I've known Dave my entire law enforcement career. His dad, was my deputy chief for a long time.
Yeah.
And and I've told Dave before. I said, "Yeah, your dad's only yelled at me once or twice." Well deserved.
Yeah.
Lonzo he was a really good one. God rest his soul too.
Yeah.
It seems like, the older you get, the more people who are passing away. And it's like I told the academy class when I taught Pitt the other week. The longer you stay in this career, you're going to know people who are going to pass away from on the job issues, or by their own hand, or by just something beyond their control.
Right.
And I was looking back the other day, and it's not a low number of officers that I personally knew who have, ended their life by their own hand.
Yeah.
And then some who have been involved in accidents, whether on the job or off the job.
Right.
And it's not, not just local. I mean, the longer you're in this career, people. I guarantee you, if I went down to somewhere in South Georgia and I said, do y'all know, or does anybody down here know George Lemming?
Somebody would.
Somebody's going to know George Lemming.
Yeah, yeah.
He was one of my supervisors, and I give him a lot of credit for teaching me at 19, 20 years old how to survive on the road.
Yeah.
And, that's George's one rule is, hey, when we come in, we all come in together, we all go home together.
Yeah. That's the supervisor you want in that job.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, man, we're at 3 hours.
It goes by quick.
It does.
I'll be honest with you. I think if I wrote a book, it'd probably have to be about 12 chapters, maybe even more.
Maybe more than that.
Maybe more than that.
We'll sit down and do this again if you want to, but
shoot, yeah.
We got going on our lives at some point.
We got didn't even touch on, new business I started running because I got bored with my shoulder replacement.
Yeah.
But
we'll bring you back. Talk about that. For sure. We might split this one in 2 episodes anyway.
Man, I'm all for it. There's I don't know. I don't want to just ramble on, but
I got to have a guest every week.
There's a lot more. So
good deal. Man, this is the longest episode we've ever done.
Well, hopefully it'll get you some views in there that won't be too bad.
Oh man, it's been a good one. I appreciate you coming out and sitting down with us. And we didn't talk about any kind of time constraint or anything, and it's fine, but we're usually hour 20, hour 30.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I got you.
It's not like we're limited to that. It's just typically how long it goes.
I got you. Well, when I get to talking, man, I can roll on.
You've been great. Most of the time I'll talk to a guest and how long was your show? And it's hour 30 sometimes. Well, I don't have that much to say. Hour 25 minutes. They look over at that little clock and go, we've been here for an hour and a half. Yeah, we have.
Well, it went by quick.
It does.
I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah. I've wanted to do this for a long time, but I knew I had to wait on you to be ready to do it. So
right.
You reached out a little while back and was like, hey, I think I'm ready to have that talk now. I said, okay, come on in. We'll get it done.
All right. Well, I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, guys. Wherever you're watching, listening, be sure to like, share, subscribe, tell folks about us. God bless you guys. We love you. See you next time.